Hey, beautiful souls. Are you ready for a journey from captivity to freedom? From the chains of broken promises to the fierce embrace of a love that shouldn't exist? Tonight, we're diving deep into a world where omegas are hunted like prey, where the most dangerous alpha in existence makes his living destroying omega trafficking rings, and where sometimes your destined mate is the very wolf you should fear most. I need you to buckle up, because we're about to meet Sera Ashwood, a woman who's survived horrors that would break most wolves, who's been told her entire life that she's damaged goods, irreparably broken. But here's what I want you to remember as we begin. Sometimes the monsters we fear are fighting demons we can't see. Sometimes broken doesn't mean weak. It means surviving what should have killed you. Are you with me? Then let's step into the blood-stained darkness of an Omega auction house. On the night, everything changed. Chapter 1. The basement of the Crimson Moon Club reeked of fear, sweat, and expensive cologne. Sera Ashwood pressed her palms against the cold concrete wall of her cage. The same cage where she'd spent 3 months since Cassius Blackwater had bought her from her own father, and tried to steady her racing heart. Tonight was auction night, the night when high-ranking alphas from across the territory came to bid on specialty omegas. Wolves like her who'd been broken trained, made obedient through methods she tried not to think about. She smoothed down the sheer white slip they'd forced her to wear, the fabric whispering against skin covered in fading bruises. Around her, other Omega captives huddled in their own cages, their vacant eyes reflecting the harsh fluorescent lighting. Sera, the deep voice made her flinch, and there he was. Cassius Blackwater in all his cruel glory. 6 feet 2 inches of pure predatory power, with golden hair that caught the light and those cold blue eyes that had haunted her nightmares since the day her father sold her to pay gambling debts. Her Omega instincts screamed at her to submit, to bare her neck, to be the obedient little wolf they'd tried to train her to become. "Please," she whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. "Not tonight. I can't." "You'll do exactly what you're told," Cassius interrupted, his voice dripping with casual cruelty. "I've got 3 alphas flying in from the coastal territories specifically to bid on you. You're my premium product tonight, little Omega." Premium product. Like she was a car or a piece of furniture. Not a living, breathing wolf with dreams and fears and a heart that still somehow kept beating. Around them, other handlers were preparing their captives, applying makeup to cover bruises, adjusting chains, administering suppressants to keep Omega scents under control until the auction began. "I won't do it," Sera said, and was shocked by the steadiness in her own voice. "I won't let you sell me like livestock." Cassius's expression darkened. His hand shot out, gripping her jaw through the cage bars with bruising force. "You don't have a choice. You signed the contract. You belong to me until someone with deeper pockets takes ownership." "I was 17, she hissed. "My father forced me to sign. That contract isn't legal. And who's going to enforce Omega protection laws?" Cassius laughed, the sound ugly and harsh. "The same alphas who'll be bidding on you tonight. The authorities who turn a blind eye as long as we pay our bribes." He was right. She knew he was right. In this world, Omegas had 2 choices. Find a decent alpha to bond with, or become property of those who saw them as commodities. 10 minutes until auction start. Someone called from upstairs. "Get the merchandise ready." Sera's cage door swung open. 2 handlers reached for her, their grips professional and unforgiving. But before they could drag her out, the lights went dead. The basement plunged into absolute darkness, except for the emergency lighting that cast everything in eerie red. Shouts erupted from upstairs, confusion, alarm, the distinct sound of fighting. "What the hell?" Cassius snarled. "Check the circuit breakers. This is not the night for technical difficulties." But Sera's Omega senses were screaming that this wasn't a power outage. This was something else. Something dangerous. The scent hit her a moment before he appeared. Pine and gunpowder, and something wild that made her Omega sit up and take notice despite every instinct telling her to run. A massive silhouette filled the basement doorway. Backlit by emergency lighting, he looked like death incarnate. 6 feet 5 inches of pure lethal power, with black hair and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light. Cassius Blackwater. The stranger's voice was deep, cold, absolutely devoid of mercy. "You're under arrest for Omega trafficking, kidnapping, and about 17 other charges I'm going to enjoy listing while you rot in a cell." Cassius went pale. You're supposed to be in the Northern Territories." "Surprise," the stranger said, and smiled like a predator who'd just cornered prey. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out about your little auction house?" That's when Sera recognized him from whispered stories, from warnings passed between captive omegas about the most dangerous alpha in existence. Dante Nightshade, the Dark Alpha, the hunter who'd made his reputation destroying trafficking rings with brutal efficiency. The hunter who never, ever left survivors among the traffickers. Cassius shifted without warning, his wolf bursting free in an explosion of gold and fury. Around them, other handlers were scrambling for weapons, for exits, for anything that might save them. But Dante Nightshade moved like liquid death. He shifted mid-stride, his massive black wolf taking down two handlers before they could even draw their weapons. The basement erupted into chaos, snarls and screams, and the distinctive sound of bones breaking. Sera pressed herself against the back of her cage, torn between terror and desperate hope. The story said Dante Nightshade destroyed everything connected to Omega trafficking, that he showed no mercy, took no prisoners, left nothing but bodies and ashes. But the stories also said he freed the Omegas, that he was the only alpha in existence who actually enforced protection laws. The fight was over in less than 2 minutes. Cassius lay unconscious, zip-tied and bleeding. His handlers were similarly restrained or dead. Sera couldn't tell which in the chaos. Then Dante Nightshade shifted back to human form and turned his attention to the cages. His dark eyes swept over the cowering Omegas with an expression Sera couldn't quite read. Not pity, something harder, more complicated. Like he was staring at reflections of pain he understood too well. "You're safe now," he said, his voice gentler than she expected. "I'm going to get you out, get you medical attention, and connect you with Omega advocacy services." He moved from cage to cage, breaking locks with casual strength. Other Omegas scrambled out, some crying, others too traumatized to move. When he reached Sera's cage, their eyes met, and the world stopped. The bond hit like lightning to the chest, immediate, undeniable, absolutely devastating. Sera gasped as her Omega recognized its alpha, as ancient instincts screamed that this wolf, this dangerous predator covered in her captor's blood, was hers. Dante's expression shifted from professional detachment to shocked recognition to something that looked like horror. "No," he whispered. "No, that's not possible." But Sera could smell it now, beneath the gunpowder and violence. Pine and midnight and the unmistakable scent of destined mate. The dark alpha who hunted Omega traffickers with ruthless efficiency had just discovered his mate was one of the broken Omegas he'd come to save. "Please," Sera whispered, not sure what she was begging for. Freedom, protection, for him to acknowledge the bond that was pulling them together like gravity? Dante's jaw tightened. He broke her cage lock with shaking hands, then stepped back quickly, putting distance between them. "You're coming with me," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "But not because of this. Because you need protection until we dismantle the rest of Blackwater's operation." Around them, other members of Dante's team were arriving, alphas and betas in tactical gear, efficiently processing the scene, calling for medical assistance. A tall, scarred beta approached Dante. "Boss, we've got 12 Omegas total, all showing signs of long-term captivity. Medical transport is 5 minutes out." "Good. Make sure they all get full evaluations and therapy referrals." Dante's voice was all business, but Sera could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he wouldn't quite look at her. "And her?" The beta nodded toward Sera. "She comes with us. Direct protective custody." The beta's eyebrows rose slightly. "Direct custody? That's not standard protocol." "I don't care about protocol," Dante snapped. "She's a priority witness. Blackwater was planning to sell her tonight, which means he has buyers we need to identify." It was a lie. Sera could smell the lie beneath his words. But she also understood it. He was protecting her, claiming her for her own safety, even as he denied the mate bond blazing between them. As medical teams arrived and began assessing the rescued Omegas, Sera found herself bundled into an SUV with dark-tinted windows. Dante climbed into the driver's seat, and one of his team members, a female alpha with kind eyes, sat in back with Sera. "I'm Nora," the woman said gently. "I'm going to take you somewhere safe. You're not in trouble. You're not being detained. You're free now. Do you understand? Free." The word felt foreign on Sera's tongue. She'd been property for so long she'd almost forgotten what freedom meant. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Dante's dark eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, and the mate bond pulled tight between them. "Somewhere you'll be protected," he said quietly. "Somewhere Blackwater's associates can't reach you." What he didn't say, what hung in the air like unspoken truth, was, "Somewhere I can figure out what to do about the fact that my destined mate is everything I swore I'd never claim." As they drove through the night toward an unknown destination, Sera touched her neck where Cassius had once threatened to place a permanent mark of ownership. She'd survived 3 months of hell, had endured what should have broken her completely. Now she was free, rescued by the most dangerous alpha alive, who also happened to be her destined mate. The question was, would freedom with a mate who clearly didn't want the bond be any better than captivity? Or had she simply traded one cage for another? Chapter 2. Dawn was breaking when the SUV finally stopped. Sera had dozed fitfully during the 3-hour drive, jerking awake each time the vehicle hit a bump, her body still conditioned to expect pain. "We're here," Nora said gently, her hand a warm pressure on Sera's shoulder. Here turned out to be a massive compound hidden deep in mountain territory. High walls, security checkpoints, buildings that looked more like a small village than a single residence. "Welcome to Sanctuary," Dante said, climbing out of the driver's seat. "My headquarters, I guess you'd call it." Other vehicles were pulling in behind them. The medical transport with the other rescued Omegas, tactical teams returning from the raid. The compound hummed with purposeful activity. But it was the Omegas that caught Sera's attention. Walking freely, laughing with each other, working alongside alphas and betas with easy familiarity. No fear in their sense, no submission in their postures. "Is this real?" she whispered. "It's real," Nora assured her. "Dante's been building Sanctuary for 8 years. It's part safe house, part training facility, part new life center for Omegas escaping trafficking situations." Sera stared at the dark alpha's broad back as he coordinated with his team. The stories painted him as a ruthless hunter, a killer who destroyed trafficking rings with extreme prejudice. They never mentioned he was building a refuge. "Sera." Dante appeared beside her, his proximity making her Omega purr despite everything. "I need to get your statement about Blackwater's operation. But first, let's get you checked by medical and settled somewhere you can rest." "I don't need." "You need medical attention," he interrupted firmly. "Those bruises tell me Blackwater wasn't gentle with his merchandise." The clinical word merchandise made her flinch, and she saw regret flash across his features. "Sorry," he muttered. I'm not good with victims. That's why I usually let my team handle the aftercare." "Then why are you handling me personally?" The question came out sharper than intended. Their eyes met, and the mate bond thrummed between them like a living thing. "You know why?" he said quietly. Yes, she did, because ignoring a mate bond was like ignoring gravity. Possible for brief moments, but ultimately futile. "Boss." A massive alpha approached, his scarred face softening slightly when he saw Sera. "Medical team is ready for evaluations. Should I take her?" "No." The word came out sharper than Dante probably intended. "I'll take her." The scarred alpha's eyebrows rose, but he didn't comment. Just nodded and walked away. Dante led her through the compound, and Sera tried not to notice how every Omega they passed looked healthy, whole, healing. How the alphas moved with protective awareness, but not predatory intent. The medical facility was state-of-the-art, staffed by Omega medical professionals who handled her with gentleness she'd almost forgotten existed. "Malnutrition," the doctor murmured, making notes. "Evidence of repeated physical trauma. Some scarring that suggests silver restraints. When did you last have a full heat cycle?" "They suppressed them," Sera admitted, shame burning through her. Cassius said buyers preferred Omegas who wouldn't be inconvenient. Dante, standing guard outside the examination room, went very still. Through the partially open door, she could see his hands clenching into fists. "The suppressants will wear off in a few weeks," the doctor said matter-of-factly. "We'll monitor you closely. Heat cycles after forced suppression can be intense." Intense. That was one word for it. Sera had heard horror stories of Omegas whose cycles came back with devastating force after prolonged suppression. And she was potentially going to experience that while living in a compound with her unclaimed mate. Perfect. After medical cleared her with a prescription for nutritional supplements and trauma therapy, Dante led her to a small cabin on the edge of the compound. "It's private," he explained, his voice carefully neutral, "but close enough to central facilities if you need anything. You're not a prisoner here, Sera. You can leave whenever you want. But I'd recommend staying at least until we've dismantled the rest of Blackwater's network. How long will that take? Weeks. Maybe months. These operations are like hydras. Cut off one head, 3 more appear. Sera stepped into the cabin and found it surprisingly comfortable. Clean, warm, with a real bed and windows that actually opened. Nothing like the cage she'd called home for 3 months. There's food in the kitchen, clothes in the dresser that should fit, Dante continued, still standing in the doorway like he was afraid to come closer. My team will want to debrief you tomorrow about Blackwater's operation. But tonight, just rest. He turned to leave, and before Sera could stop herself, she called out, Why are you doing this? He paused, his back to her. Doing what? Building all this. Hunting traffickers. Saving Omegas. She gestured around them. The stories say you're a monster. The stories aren't wrong. His voice was flat, emotionless. I am a monster. I've killed more wolves than I can count. Done things that would make you run screaming if you knew the details. Then why? Because someone has to. He finally turned to face her, and the raw pain in his dark eyes stole her breath. Someone has to stand between predators and prey. Someone has to make the traffickers afraid. And if that someone has to be a monster to do it effectively, he shrugged. Then I'll be the monster. The mate bond ached between them, pulling her toward him even as logic screamed at her to stay away. What about us? The question slipped out before she could stop it. The bond will be ignored, he interrupted firmly. I didn't build all this to claim an Omega who's been through trauma, who probably can't tell the difference between genuine mate bond pull and trauma bonding with her rescuer. His words hit like a slap. You think I'm confused? That I can't tell the difference between trauma and destiny? I think you've been through hell, he said quietly. And I think the last thing you need is an alpha claiming you before you've had time to heal. What if I never heal? The words came out broken raw. What if I'm permanently damaged? Does that mean I never get to have a mate, never get to be claimed, never get to be anything but broken goods? Dante crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides. His hands cupped her face, and the touch sent electricity down her spine. You are not broken, he said fiercely. You are a survivor. You are strong and brave, and everything those bastards tried to destroy but couldn't. Then why won't you? Because you deserve better than me, he whispered. You deserve an alpha who's good and gentle and whole. Not a killer with blood on his hands and demons in his head. The pain in his voice, the absolute conviction that he wasn't worthy of her, broke something in Sera's chest. What if I get to decide what I deserve? She asked, her hands coming up to cover his where they still cradled her face. For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her, might claim her, might acknowledge that the bond between them was real and powerful and undeniable. Instead, he stepped back, putting careful distance between them once more. Get some rest, he said, his voice rough. Tomorrow we start figuring out how to keep you safe. And then he was gone, leaving Sera alone in her comfortable prison with a mate bond that felt like both salvation and damnation. She sank onto the bed, pulling her knees to her chest, and let herself finally truly break. But even as she cried for her lost innocence, her stolen autonomy, her impossible situation, a small flame of defiance burned in her chest. Dante Nightshade thought she needed time to heal before she could make decisions about their bond. Fine. She'd use that time. She'd recover, grow stronger, prove to him and herself that she was more than just a broken Omega. And then she'd show the Dark Alpha exactly what kind of mate a survivor could become. But first, she had to figure out how to survive living in close proximity with a destined mate who was determined to keep his distance. How hard could it be? Chapter 3. Sera woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, scents so different from the stale water and protein bars that had sustained her in captivity that for a moment she forgot where she was. Then the events of the previous night came flooding back like warm water washing over frozen limbs. The rescue, the bond, the impossible alpha who'd saved her life and then refused to claim her. She sat up in the narrow bed, taking in her surroundings by morning light. The cabin was simple but comfortable, with warm wood paneling and soft furnishings that spoke of care rather than just functionality. Sera, you awake in there? Nora's voice carried warmth and something that might have been excitement. Breakfast is ready, and trust me, you don't want to miss Elena's cooking. Coming, Sera called, then winced at how rough her voice sounded. She'd cried herself hoarse during the night. She splashed cold water on her face from the bathroom sink, trying to wash away the evidence of her breakdown. In the small mirror above the basin, a stranger looked back at her. Same dark auburn hair, same green eyes, but there was something different now. Harder, like she'd shed some essential softness overnight and found steel beneath. Nora waited on the porch with a genuine smile. She was dressed in practical clothes, jeans, boots, a flannel shirt, but moved with the fluid grace of a trained warrior. "Sleep at all?" Nora asked. "Some," Sera lied, wrapping her arms around herself. "I keep expecting to wake up back in the cage. Like this is all some dream my mind created to cope." Nora's expression softened with understanding. "I know that feeling. Took me 6 months after my rescue before I stopped having nightmares about going back." Something in Nora's tone made Sera look at her more carefully. "You were trafficked too?" "Worse. I was the one doing the trafficking." Nora's smile turned sharp-edged. "Worked for a syndicate for 3 years before I realized what I was really doing. Dante found me during a raid, gave me a choice: rot in prison or help him destroy the organizations I'd served. And you chose this. Best decision I ever made. Saving Omegas doesn't undo what I did, but it's a start." They walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, following a winding path toward what looked like a communal dining hall. Dante has a way of collecting broken things and helping them find purpose. The dining hall was already filled with activity. Omegas, betas, and alphas mingled freely, their easy interactions speaking of genuine community rather than forced hierarchy. But it was the woman at the stove who caught Sera's attention. Silver-haired and elegant despite being dressed in simple kitchen clothes, she moved with the quiet confidence of someone who'd survived hell and came out stronger. When she turned and her steel-gray eyes found Sera's, recognition flared between them. Not the mate bond, something else. Something that spoke of shared experience and understanding. "You must be Sera," the woman said, her voice warm honey over steel. "I'm Elena. Welcome to Sanctuary." "Elena runs our integration program," Nora explained. "She helps new arrivals adjust, connects them with resources, basically makes sure nobody falls through the cracks." Elena set a plate in front of Sera. Eggs, bacon, fresh fruit. More food than she'd seen in months. "Eat slowly," she advised gently. "Your stomach isn't used to rich food anymore. Don't want you getting sick." As Sera ate, trying not to wolf down the food despite her ravenous hunger, she became aware of curious glances from other residents. Whispers that carried just far enough for Omega hearing to catch. "That's her. The one Dante brought in personally. I heard she's his mate. He's never claimed anyone before." Elena cleared her throat loudly, and the whispers stopped. "Anyone with questions can ask me later. Let the girl eat in peace." After breakfast, Nora led Sera on a tour of the compound. The medical facility she'd seen last night. Training areas where Omegas learned self-defense and wolves practiced tactical maneuvers. Therapy rooms, classrooms, even a garden where several Omegas tended vegetables with obvious care. "This is incredible," Sera breathed. "How long has all this been here?" "Dante started building 8 years ago," Nora said. "Started with just 1 building and 12 rescued Omegas. Now we've got capacity for 80 residents, plus staff quarters and training facilities." "What happened 8 years ago?" Nora's expression darkened. "That's Dante's story to tell. But let's just say he had personal reasons for wanting to destroy the trafficking trade." They were walking past the training area when Sera saw him. Dante, stripped to the waist and covered in sweat, sparring with the massive scarred alpha from the night before. They moved like dancers in a deadly ballet, all controlled power and lethal precision. The mate bond pulled at her, making her Omega want to go to him, to touch him, to claim what was hers. "That's Axel," Nora said, following Sera's gaze. "Dante's second in command. Been with him since the beginning." As if sensing her attention, Dante's eyes found hers across the training ground. For a heartbeat, everything else faded away. The noise, the other people. Everything except the connection that hummed between them like a living thing. Then Dante looked away deliberately, turning his attention back to Axel. The dismissal stung more than it should have. "He's an idiot," Nora said matter-of-factly. "Thinks keeping his distance is protecting you. Doesn't realize he's just making it harder for both of you." "Maybe he's right," Sera said quietly. "Maybe I do need time before I can make clear decisions about the bond." "Or maybe," Nora replied, her voice gentle but firm, "he needs time to forgive himself for whatever demons he's carrying. Either way, you're both dancing around something inevitable." The rest of the day passed in a blur of introductions and information. Sera met the medical staff, the therapy team, the security personnel. She learned about the integration program, the job training opportunities, the counseling services available to all residents. Every Omega she met had a story. Some had been trafficked like her. Others had escaped abusive mates or dangerous pack situations. A few were born Omegas who'd never had pack protection at all. But they all shared one thing. They'd found safety here, in this compound built by an alpha who refused to claim his own mate. As evening approached, Elena found Sera in the library, staring at books without really seeing them. "Walk with me," Elena said, and it wasn't quite a request. They walked through the compound's gardens as sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Elena moved with the careful precision of someone whose body remembered pain even after healing. "How long were you captive?" Elena asked finally. 3 months with Cassius Blackwater. Before that, Sera's throat tightened. "My father sold me to pay gambling debts. I was 17. And you survived," Elena said simply. "That takes strength most wolves never discover they have." "I don't feel strong. I feel broken." Elena stopped walking and turned to face her, those steel-gray eyes seeing too much. "Broken and weak are not the same thing, child. A bone that heals from a fracture is often stronger than it was before. You've been fractured, yes, but you're healing. What if Dante's right? What if I can't tell the difference between the mate bond and trauma bonding with my rescuer? Can I tell you a story?" Elena didn't wait for an answer. 20 years ago, I was captured by a trafficking ring. Spent 5 years in captivity before someone very much like Dante rescued me. I was convinced I was in love with my rescuer. Couldn't tell the difference between gratitude and genuine feeling. What happened? I took time, healed, built a life for myself. And you know what I discovered? Elena's smile was soft. The feelings weren't love. They were gratitude, respect, affection. All real and valid, but not the mate bond. She paused. I also discovered that I knew the difference. Deep down, I always knew. I just needed permission to trust my own judgment. "So you think I should push Dante to acknowledge the bond?" "I think you should trust yourself," Elena corrected. "You've survived things that would destroy most wolves. Don't let anyone, including Dante, including me, tell you that survival has made you incapable of knowing your own heart." They walked back toward the cabins in comfortable silence. As they reached Sera's door, Elena added, "One more thing. Dante's keeping his distance because he thinks he's protecting you. But he's also protecting himself. Ask yourself, and him, what he's really afraid of." That night, Sera lay in bed thinking about Elena's words. What was Dante afraid of? That she'd reject him once she healed? That he'd hurt her? That the bond was real and claiming her would make him vulnerable in ways his carefully controlled life couldn't accommodate? Through the window, she could see lights still burning in the main building where Dante had his office. Working late, always working, throwing himself into his mission with single-minded determination. Maybe tomorrow she'd start finding answers. Maybe tomorrow she'd start showing the dark alpha that broken didn't mean helpless, and that survivors knew exactly what they wanted. But first, she needed to survive her first full day of freedom. And she was beginning to realize that freedom came with its own challenges. Like learning to trust herself again, like rebuilding an identity beyond victim, like believing she deserved the happiness her mate bond offered. One day at a time, she told herself. One moment of courage at a time. She could do this. She'd survived captivity. Surely she could survive falling in love with an alpha who was terrified of claiming her. Surely. Chapter 4. Sera's second week at Sanctuary began with an unexpected summons to Dante's office. She'd been avoiding him, or more accurately, he'd been avoiding her. But apparently, it was time for her formal debriefing about Blackwater's operation. Nora walked with her, offering silent support as they navigated the compound's main building. Other residents greeted them warmly, and Sera was struck again by how different this place was from anything she'd experienced before. Pack but not pack. Family but not blood. Something new and precious and fragile. "He's not as scary as he looks," Nora said as they approached Dante's office door. "Well, actually he is. But not to you. That's not as reassuring as you think it is." Nora grinned and knocked. Dante's deep voice called for them to enter. His office was exactly what Sera expected. Functional, organized, covered in maps and case files and evidence of a war being waged against darkness. Dante sat behind a massive desk, looking every inch the dangerous alpha his reputation claimed. But his eyes, when they met hers, held a warmth that belied the careful distance he maintained. "Sera, thank you for coming." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Nora, you can stay if Sera wants you here." Sera appreciated being given the choice. "I'm okay." Nora nodded and left, closing the door behind her with a soft click. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and undeniable attraction. Finally, Dante pulled out a file and opened it with deliberate movements. "I need you to tell me everything you know about Blackwater's operation," he said, his voice professional. "Locations, names, buyers you heard mentioned. Anything that might help us dismantle the rest of his network." For the next hour, Sera forced herself to relive the nightmare. She described the other locations Cassius had mentioned, the names dropped during phone calls she'd overheard, the patterns she'd noticed in who came and went from the auction house. Dante took notes with focused intensity, occasionally asking clarifying questions. But she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened when she described particularly brutal treatment. "There was someone else," she said finally. "Someone Cassius was afraid of. He called him the Collector. Said he had connections that could destroy anyone who crossed him." Dante's pen stopped moving. "The Collector. Did Cassius say anything else about him?" "Just that he was interested in special omegas. Ones with rare traits or unusual abilities. Cassius was trying to find him something specific." "Like what?" Sera hesitated, then decided honesty was the only option. "Like me. Cassius said I was special, that my scent was different from other omegas. He was planning to market me as a rare variant." Dante's eyes flashed with something dangerous. "There's no such thing as omega variants. That's black market propaganda to drive up prices." "Maybe," Sera said quietly. "Or maybe there's something about me Cassius recognized that I don't understand yet." Before Dante could respond, an alarm blared through the compound. 3 short bursts followed by 2 long ones. Dante was on his feet instantly, all traces of careful distance vanishing. "That's a breach alarm," he said, moving toward a weapons locker. "Someone's at the perimeter." "Cassius. More likely his associates coming to reclaim valuable merchandise." His voice was cold, clinical. Then his eyes found hers and softened slightly. "Stay here. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except Nora or Axel. I'm not helpless. I know you're not." He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "But I can't focus on defending this compound if I'm worried about you. Please, Sera. Stay here where I know you're safe." The vulnerability in his voice, the admission that her safety mattered more than his carefully maintained distance, made her chest tighten. "Go," she said. "I'll lock the door." He nodded, then did something that shocked them both. He pressed a quick, fierce kiss to her forehead before pulling away and heading for the door. "Stay safe," he said, and then he was gone. Sera locked the door as instructed, then moved to the window. From this vantage point, she could see the compound's main gate where Dante's team was already mobilizing. Alphas in tactical gear, betas with weapons, even some of the more experienced Omega residents taking up defensive positions. 3 vehicles were approaching fast, black SUVs with tinted windows that screamed danger. Through the window, she watched Dante transform from the alpha who'd kissed her forehead into the dark alpha of legend. Cold, lethal, absolutely uncompromising. The vehicles stopped just outside the gate. Doors opened, and wolves emerged, 5 of them, all alphas radiating authority and aggression. But it was the one in the center who made Sera's blood run cold. Tall, impeccably dressed, with silver hair and eyes that held no warmth at all. Even from this distance, she could smell the power rolling off him like a visible aura. The Collector. Somehow, impossibly, the one person Cassius had feared most had found sanctuary. Sera watched as Dante approached the gate, his team flanking him in a protective formation. Even though she couldn't hear the conversation from this distance, she could read the tension in every line of Dante's body. Then the Collector gestured toward the compound, and Sera's Omega senses screamed a warning. He was looking for her, specifically for her. Without conscious thought, she pulled out her phone, one of the basic models Sanctuary provided all residents, and texted Nora. "The Collector is here. He's looking for me. What do I do?" The response came within seconds. "Stay hidden. Dante won't let them take you. Trust him." But as Sera watched the confrontation at the gate escalate, as she saw more vehicles approaching in the distance, she realized something that made her blood run cold. The collector hadn't come with a small team. He'd come with an army. And Sanctuary, for all its defenses and trained personnel, wasn't built to withstand a full-scale assault. Chapter 5. The standoff at the gates stretched into tense minutes. Through the window, Sera watched as the collector and Dante faced each other like opposing forces of nature. One cold and calculating, the other barely restrained fury. Her phone buzzed. Nora again. Axel says get to the safe room. Now. 3rd floor, east wing, behind the bookshelf in the library. Sera's fingers hovered over the reply. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to let the stronger wolves handle this. But another part of her, the part that had survived 3 months in captivity, that had refused to break even when everything else was taken from her, whispered something different. She was tired of being saved, tired of being protected, tired of being the helpless Omega everyone fought over, but never actually asked what she wanted. Instead of heading to the safe room, Sera unlocked Dante's office door and moved toward the stairs that led down to the main entrance. She could hear voices now, raised in argument, and the distinctive sound of weapons being readied. Don't care about your operation, Nightshade, the collector's voice carried clearly through the compound. I care about property that was promised to me. Cassius Blackwater guaranteed delivery of a rare Omega variant, and I've come to collect. There are no Omega variants. Dante's voice was pure ice. You're chasing folklore and black market lies. Am I? The collector laughed, the sound devoid of humor. Then explain why the Omega you rescued from Blackwater's auction house carries a scent profile that matches genetic markers we haven't seen in over a century. Explain why my researchers have been tracking her bloodline for 3 years. Sera's steps faltered. Her bloodline? What did her family history have to do with anything? You're not taking anyone from this compound, Dante said flatly. Walk away while you still can. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and outmaneuvered. The collector gestured to the vehicles still approaching. I've brought 40 enforcers. You have what, maybe 20 trained fighters. And half of those are traumatized Omegas who've barely learned which end of a gun to point. Then it'll be a fair fight, Dante replied, and even from her position on the stairs, Sera could hear the smile in his voice. The dangerous, predatory smile that promised violence. That's when Sera stepped into view at the top of the main staircase, where both groups could see her clearly. Stop. Every eye turned toward her. Dante's expression shifted from lethal calm to something close to panic. Sera, get back inside, he ordered, his alpha authority ringing in his voice. But Sera had spent 3 months obeying alpha orders. She was done with that. No, she said simply, descending the stairs with more confidence than she felt. If this is about me, then I get a say in what happens. The collector's eyes lit up with triumph. Ah, the prize herself. Even more beautiful than the photograph suggested. I'm not a prize, Sera said coldly, coming to stand beside Dante. I'm a person, and I'm not going anywhere with you. I'm afraid that's not your decision to make. The collector pulled out a document, waving it negligently. I have a legally binding contract signed by your father, selling your breeding rights to my organization. You belong to me. My father had no right to sell me. I was a minor. That contract is invalid. Valid enough in the territories where I operate, the collector countered. And valid enough that Omega protection agencies will look the other way as long as I provide the appropriate incentives. Sera felt Dante tense beside her, could smell the fury building in him like an approaching storm. Through their bond, she felt his barely controlled need to tear the collector apart with his bare hands. You need to leave, she said to the collector, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Dante Nightshade doesn't negotiate with traffickers. He destroys them. And if you think 40 enforcers will be enough to take this compound, you don't understand what you're facing. Oh, I understand perfectly. The collector's smile was cold as winter. I understand that Dante Nightshade, for all his reputation, has never faced someone willing to burn his precious sanctuary to the ground to get what they want. I understand that he's built something he cares about, which means he's vulnerable in ways he never was before. He gestured, and his enforcers began spreading out, taking up strategic positions around the compound's perimeter. So here's my offer, the collector continued. Surrender the Omega variant to me, and I'll leave peacefully. Refuse, and I'll take her anyway, but only after I've destroyed everything you've built. Every building, every resident, every dream of a safe haven for broken omegas. I'll make sure the wolf world knows that Dante Nightshade's sanctuary fell because he was too selfish to give up one omega. The silence that followed was absolute. Sera could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her, could sense the fear rippling through the Omega residents who'd found safety here. This was her fault. Her presence was endangering everyone. "Take me," she said quietly. "No." Dante's response was immediate and absolute. "If it saves everyone else." "No." He turned to face her, his dark eyes blazing with an intensity that stole her breath. "I don't care if I have to fight 40 wolves for 100 wolves or 4,000 wolves. You're not going with him. You're not going back to captivity. You're not becoming anyone's property ever again. But the others. Trust me," he said, and for the first time since she'd met him, he reached out and took her hand. The touch sent electricity racing up her arm, and through their bond, she felt his absolute certainty. "Trust that I have a plan." She wanted to ask what plan could possibly work against impossible odds. But before she could speak, Elena's voice rang out from behind them. "Actually, we have several plans." Sera turned to see Elena standing at the compound entrance, and she wasn't alone. Behind her stood at least 30 more wolves, omegas, betas, and alphas, all armed and moving with the controlled precision of trained fighters. "You thought Sanctuary was just a recovery center?" Elena said, her voice carrying across the compound. "Did you really think Dante built all this without preparing for someone exactly like you to come calling?" The collector's confident expression faltered slightly. "Every Omega in this compound has received combat training," Elena continued. "Every resident knows how to defend themselves and each other. And most importantly, every single wolf here is willing to fight to the death, rather than let traffickers take what they've built." Nora appeared beside Sera, pressing a weapon into her hands. "Can you shoot?" "I don't know." "Then stay behind me and look intimidating." Nora's grin was fierce. "We've got this." The collector's eyes narrowed as he reassessed the situation. His 40 enforcers suddenly didn't seem like such overwhelming odds against a compound full of wolves who had nothing left to lose. "This doesn't have to end in bloodshed," the collector said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "I'm a reasonable man. Perhaps we can negotiate." "You came to my home," Dante interrupted, his voice dropping to a deadly growl. "Threatened my people. Tried to take my mate. There's nothing to negotiate." The admission, "my mate," hung in the air like a declaration of war. The collector's expression shifted to something calculating. "Ah, so the rumors are true. The Dark Alpha finally found his mate, and it's the very Omega I've been seeking. How? Inconvenient for both of us." "Last chance," Dante said quietly. "Leave now, or I start collecting bodies." For a long moment, the collector seemed to weigh his options. His enforcers were armed and trained, but they were mercenaries. The wolves of Sanctuary were fighting for their home, their freedom, their family. "This isn't over," the collector said finally. "I've invested too much in acquiring that Omega to walk away. But I'm a patient man. I can wait for a better opportunity." He signaled his enforcers, and slowly, carefully, they began withdrawing toward their vehicles. But as the collector climbed into his SUV, he looked directly at Sera. "I'll be seeing you again, little Omega. You can run, you can hide behind your mate, but eventually, you'll have to face what you are. And when that day comes, you'll understand why I'm willing to burn down the world to possess you." The vehicles pulled away, disappearing into the forest with a rumble of engines and the promise of future violence. The moment they were out of sight, Dante turned to Axel. "Full lockdown. Double the perimeter patrols. I want eyes on every approach to this compound 24/7. On it, boss." Axel moved off, barking orders to the security team. Dante's attention shifted to Sera, and the carefully controlled mask cracked. "What the hell were you thinking? I told you to stay in my office." "I was thinking that if this was about me, I had a right to be part of the solution," Sera shot back, her own fear translating into anger. "I'm not some helpless Omega who needs to be locked away while the big, strong alphas handle everything. You could have been killed. So could you. So could everyone here." She gestured at the compound around them. "At least if I'd gone with him, the rest of you would have been safe." "Safe?" Dante's laugh was harsh. "You think any of us would feel safe knowing we sacrificed you to a trafficker? That we gave up on one of our own to save our own skins? I'm not one of your own. I've been here 2 weeks. You're my mate." The words exploded out of him with a force that made several nearby wolves step back. "You're my mate, And that makes you pack, makes you family, makes you worth burning down the entire world to protect. Do you understand that? Sera stared at him, chest heaving, emotions churning between anger and relief, and a fierce joy that he'd finally admitted what they both knew. Then stop pushing me away, she said quietly. Stop treating me like I'm too broken to make my own choices. Stop acting like the mate bond is something to be ashamed of. Around them, the compound had fallen silent. Every resident was watching their alpha and his unclaimed mate finally confront what had been building between them since that first moment in the basement. Dante's jaw worked as he struggled with something. Finally, he said, "I'm afraid." The admission, so simple and honest, diffused Sera's anger instantly. Of what? Of claiming you and then losing you. Of finally having something good in my life and watching it be destroyed. Of you realizing that I'm exactly the monster the stories say I am. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Of not being enough to heal what was done to you. Sera stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. I'm afraid too. Afraid of trusting again. Afraid of being vulnerable. Afraid that I'm too damaged for this bond to work. You're not damaged. And you're not a monster, she interrupted. We're both scared. We're both carrying trauma. But maybe we can figure it out together instead of separately. For a long moment, Dante just looked at her. Then, slowly, carefully, he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gentle touch was at odds with the lethal alpha who'd just faced down a trafficker army. I don't know how to be gentle, he admitted. Don't know how to be the kind of mate you deserve. Then we'll figure it out together, Sera said. But Dante, I need you to understand something. I'm choosing you. Not because I'm confused, not because I'm grateful you saved me, but because you're my mate and I want this bond. I want you. Something shifted in his dark eyes. Not just heat, though there was plenty of that, but something deeper. Permission, maybe, to want what he'd been denying himself. Okay, he said finally. Okay, but we do this right. You get therapy, time to heal, space to build an identity beyond victim. And when you're ready, truly ready, then we talk about claiming. It wasn't everything Sera wanted, but it was a start. It was Dante finally admitting that the bond mattered, that she mattered, that this thing between them was real. Deal, she said, and managed a small smile. Elena cleared her throat loudly. As touching as this is, maybe we should debrief about the very real threat that just left our doorstep? Dante blinked, seeming to remember they had an audience. Right. Everyone, meeting hall in 15 minutes. We need to discuss increased security protocols. As the crowd dispersed, Nora appeared beside Sera with a knowing grin. Well, that was dramatic. Your mate just claimed you in front of the entire compound without actually claiming you. Impressive emotional constipation. Despite everything, Sera laughed. He's complicated. He's an idiot, Nora corrected fondly. But he's our idiot. And he just declared war on one of the most powerful traffickers in the territory to keep you safe. That's worth something. It was worth everything, Sera thought. Even if the path forward was uncertain, even if threats still loomed, even if healing would take time. She'd finally found an alpha who saw her as more than property, more than a victim, more than broken goods. She'd found a mate who thought she was worth fighting for. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe it too. Chapter 6. The week following the collector's visit transformed Sanctuary from a recovery center into a fortress. Dante doubled security patrols, installed additional surveillance equipment, and began running combat drills with residents who were physically and emotionally ready for training. Sera threw herself into the preparations with fierce determination. If the collector was coming back, and everyone agreed he would, she refused to be the helpless Omega cowering in a safe room. Higher, Nora barked from across the training mat. Your guard is dropping. A real threat won't politely wait for you to be ready. Sera adjusted her defensive stance, feeling muscles protest that had atrophied during her months in captivity. They'd been at this for 2 hours, and every part of her body screamed for rest. Again, she said through gritted teeth. Nora's smile was approving. She moved in with another combination: punch, kick, grapple. And this time Sera managed to deflect 2 of the 3 attacks before ending up on her back. Better, Nora acknowledged, offering a hand to pull her up. You're getting faster. Another month, and you'll actually be dangerous. From the edge of the training area, Dante watched with an expression Sera couldn't quite read. He'd been doing that a lot lately. Watching her from a distance, his presence a constant weight she felt even when she couldn't see him. "Break time," Nora called. "You're pushing too hard and exhaustion makes you sloppy." Sera nodded, grateful for the reprieve. As she grabbed a water bottle, Dante approached with that careful distance he maintained like armor. "You're progressing quickly," he said. "Not quickly enough. The collector could come back any time. He won't come back the same way." Dante's voice held certainty. "He'll be smarter, more prepared. Probably try to isolate you when you're outside the compound walls. Then I won't leave the compound. That's not living, Sera. That's just a different kind of cage." The words hit harder than he probably intended. He was right. She'd escaped one prison only to potentially trap herself in another, even if this one had better amenities. "Then what do you suggest?" "I suggest you keep training. Keep healing. Keep building a life here." He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features. "And maybe, if you're willing, you let me start showing you what a mate bond can look like. Slowly, carefully, on your terms." Sera's heart skipped. "What changed?" "I spent the last week watching you transform from a terrified victim into a warrior," he said quietly. "Watching you fight for your place here, for your right to defend yourself, for your future. And I realized I've been so focused on protecting you that I haven't been seeing what's right in front of me. Which is that you don't need protecting. You need a partner. Someone who stands beside you, not in front of you." The admission felt like a gift, like permission to be more than just his rescued mate. "I'd like that," Sera said softly. "The partnership, the slow exploration, the mate bond that we build instead of one that's forced on us." Dante's smile was small but genuine. "Elena's been running a support group for bonded pairs working through trauma. If you're interested, we could attend together." "You do that. Go to therapy." "I'd do a lot of things for you," he said simply. Still figuring out how many, but apparently couples therapy is on the list. Before Sera could respond, Axel appeared at the training area entrance, his expression grim. "Boss, we have a situation. Elena needs you in the communications center immediately." Dante's demeanor shifted instantly from tentative mate to lethal alpha. "What kind of situation?" "The kind where our intel network just uncovered something about the collector that you're not going to like." Minutes later, Sera found herself in the communications center. A room she'd never seen before, filled with computers, monitors, and enough surveillance equipment to rival a government agency. Elena stood at the center terminal, her face pale. "We've been monitoring trafficking network communications since the collector's visit. One of our sources just sent this." She pulled up a file, and Sera's blood ran cold. It was a dossier. On her, complete with photographs going back to her childhood, genetic analysis, family tree mapping back 6 generations, and a section labeled Omega Variant. Classification Type 7, Empathic Bonds. "What is this?" Sera whispered. "This," Elena said grimly, "is proof that the collector wasn't lying. You're not just an Omega, Sera. You're something the wolf world thought was extinct." Dante leaned over the terminal, reading rapidly. "Type 7, Empathic Bonding. Last confirmed case was..." He scrolled down, his expression darkening. 1923. A wolf named Sera Ashwood who could form emotional connections with entire packs, who could sense and amplify the bonds between mates. "Ashwood," Sera repeated. "That's my mother's maiden name." "Because you're descended from her," Elena said gently. "Your great-great-grandmother. And apparently, the trait's been dormant in your bloodline until now." Sera sank into a chair, her mind reeling. "What does this mean?" "It means," Axel said from the doorway, "that you're worth a hell of a lot more than we thought. An empathic Omega who can strengthen mate bonds, sense emotional connections, potentially even help heal broken bonds." He whistled low. "Every pack alpha in existence would pay a fortune for that ability." "Every trafficker, you mean," Dante corrected harshly. "They'd use her to manipulate bonds, control mates, weaponize the most sacred connection wolves have." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "There's more," Elena said quietly. "The file mentions that Type 7 Omegas can only fully access their abilities after completing a true mate bond. Until then, the empathic senses are dormant, instinctive rather than controlled." Sera's eyes met Dante's across the terminal. "So the collector wants me because of what I could become after bonding. He wants you because bonded or unbonded, you're the first confirmed Type 7 in over a century," Elena said. "But yes, your full abilities would only manifest after completing a bond with your true mate." The weight of what she was, what she represented, settled over Sera like a heavy blanket. How many people know about this? Dante asked, his alpha voice cold and calculating. Based on the source routing, at least 6 major trafficking networks have access to this information, Elena replied. The collector isn't your only problem anymore. You're going to have every major player in the trafficking world trying to acquire Sera. Then we disappear, Dante said immediately. Take Sera somewhere remote, somewhere safe. No. Sera's voice was steady despite the fear churning in her gut. If I run, they'll tear apart Sanctuary looking for me. They'll hurt the other Omegas, destroy what you've built. I won't let that happen. You can't seriously be suggesting we use you as bait. I'm suggesting we use this, Sera interrupted, gesturing to the dossier. They want a Type 7 Omega? Fine. Let them think they can get me. But on our terms, on our territory, where we're ready for them. Dante looked like he wanted to argue, but Axel cut in. She's right, boss. If we run, we're always looking over our shoulders. If we make a stand, we end this. By risking her life? By trusting that I'm stronger than anyone gives me credit for, Sera said firmly. You said you wanted to be my partner, Dante. Partners trust each other. Partners fight together. She could see the war playing out behind his eyes. The protective instincts of an alpha versus the respect for her autonomy. The fear of losing her versus the recognition that she deserved agency in her own fate. We do this smart, he said finally. Controlled environment, overwhelming force on our side, exit strategies if things go wrong. Agreed. And, he continued, his voice dropping to something intimate despite their audience, we complete the mate bond. Before we face the collector again. Sera's breath caught. You said we'd wait until I was ready. I think you are ready, he said quietly. I think you've been ready for a while, and I've been the one too afraid to take that step. But if we're going into battle, if we're facing threats that want to steal you away, then I want the world to know that you're claimed. That you're mine and I'm yours, and that bond is unbreakable. Through their incomplete bond, Sera felt the truth of his words. This wasn't about possession or protection. This was about partnership, about completing something they'd both been dancing around since that first moment in the basement. When? She whispered. Tonight, if you'll have me. Around them, Elena, Axel, and the others tactfully busied themselves with equipment checks and data analysis, giving them the illusion of privacy. I'll have you, Sera said, and felt something settle in her chest. A certainty that this was right, that completing their bond was the missing piece she'd been searching for. I choose you, Dante Nightshade. I choose us. His smile was fierce and proud and full of promises she knew he'd keep. Then let's go make it official, he said, offering his hand. And tomorrow, we start planning how to end the collector's operation once and for all. Sera took his hand, feeling the rightness of it resonate through her entire being. She was about to become a fully bonded Omega, about to unlock abilities she didn't fully understand, about to face threats that wanted to use her as a weapon. But she wouldn't face any of it alone. She'd have a mate who saw her as an equal, a partner who respected her strength, and a bond that would anchor them both through whatever storms lay ahead. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Chapter 7. The bonding ceremony was nothing like Sera had imagined during her captive months, when she dreamed about impossible freedom and gentle touches from a mate who would see her as more than property. It was better. Dante had prepared his private quarters, a space she'd never seen before, located in a secure section of the compound. The room was simple but comfortable, with wide windows overlooking the mountain forest and a fireplace that cast everything in warm, golden light. Traditional bonding ceremonies involve the whole pack, Dante said, his voice carrying a nervous edge she'd never heard before. But I thought, given everything, you might prefer something private. I prefer this, Sera said honestly. Just us. No witnesses, no expectations, nothing but the bond. He moved closer, and she could smell his scent, pine and gunpowder, and something uniquely him that made her Omega purr with contentment. I need you to understand something, he said, his hands gentle as they cupped her face. Once I claim you, once I mark you, there's no going back. You'll be bound to me, to my protection, to my pack. If you have any doubts. I don't, she interrupted. Do you? My only doubt, he said quietly, is whether I'm worthy of you. Whether I can be the mate you deserve after everything you've survived. Sera reached up to cover his hands with hers. You're the alpha who built a sanctuary for broken wolves. who dedicates his life to destroying the monsters who prey on the vulnerable, who treats me like I'm strong instead of fragile. You're exactly the mate I deserve. Something in his dark eyes blazed to life. Desire, yes, but also relief and joy and fierce possessiveness. Then let me claim you, he whispered. Let me show you what it means to be cherished instead of owned. The bonding itself was gentle and fierce in equal measure. Dante took his time, mapping every inch of her skin with reverent touches, whispering promises against her neck, her shoulders, her collarbone. He waited until she was trembling with need before finally, carefully, sinking his teeth into the junction where her neck met her shoulder. The claiming mark blazed to life like fire in her veins. Not painful, transcendent. Sera felt the bond snap fully into place, felt Dante's presence flood into her mind and heart and soul like he'd always belonged there. Through the bond, she felt what he felt, overwhelming love, fierce protectiveness, and a joy so pure it brought tears to her eyes. And then, like a switch being flipped, something else awakened. Her empathic abilities exploded online. Suddenly, she could feel everything. Not just Dante's emotions, but the entire compound. Elena's quiet strength in the medical wing. Nora's determined focus during her patrol. Axel's steady loyalty as he monitored security feeds. Dozens of other presences. Each one a unique emotional signature that sang through her new senses. Sera, Dante pulled back, his voice concerned. What's happening? I can feel them, she gasped. All of them. The entire pack. Their emotions, their bonds, their connections to each other. It's overwhelming. Dante's arms tightened around her, and through the bond, she felt him deliberately projecting calm, stability, an anchor point in the storm of sensation. Focus on me, he said firmly. Just me. Let everything else fade to background noise. It took several minutes of breathing through the sensory overload, but gradually Sera learned to filter the input. The other presences didn't disappear, but they became manageable, like background music instead of a deafening roar. Better, Dante asked gently. Better, she confirmed. Then, with growing wonder. Dante, I can feel mate bonds. I can sense which wolves are bonded to each other, how strong their connections are. Elena has a bond, but it's... She frowned, trying to interpret what she was sensing. It's distant, like it's been stretched thin over distance. Her mate died 5 years ago, Dante said quietly. The bond never fully severed. It's why she understands trauma bonding so well. She's spent years learning to live with a ghost connection. Sera filed that information away, her heart aching for the older Omega. Then she felt something else through the bond. Dante's barely controlled arousal, his desire tempered by concern for her well-being. I'm okay, she said, reading his hesitation. More than okay. The abilities are intense, but they're not painful. And I can feel you, Dante. I can feel how much you want this, want me, despite all your fears about being worthy. You can read my emotions that clearly? As clearly as my own. She smiled. You're terrified of hurting me, determined to be gentle, and absolutely convinced that I'm going to come to my senses and realize I've made a mistake. Dante huffed a laugh. I really can't hide anything from you anymore, can I? No, she said, suddenly serious. But I can't hide from you either. You can feel how much I want this bond, how much I choose you, how much I'm done being afraid. Through the bond, she pushed all her certainty, all her desire, all her fierce determination that this was right. Dante growled low in his throat, and then he was kissing her again, claiming her mouth with the same intensity he'd claimed her neck. The mating completed with reverent care, with whispered promises and shared pleasure, with a bond that burned brighter than anything Sera had ever imagined. Afterward, as they lay tangled together with the fire burning low, Dante traced the fresh claiming mark on her neck with gentle fingers. How do you feel? He asked. Complete, she said honestly. Like I've been half alive until this moment. I know the feeling. He pulled her closer. Sera, about tomorrow. About the plan to use you as bait for the collector. We're still doing it, she said firmly. Bond doesn't change that. If anything, it makes me more determined to end this threat, so we can actually have a future together. I hate that you're right. Get used to it. Now that we're bonded, you're going to have to deal with me being right a lot. His laughter was warm against her hair. Fair enough. But let's at least get one night of peace before we start planning our war. Sera snuggled closer, feeling through the bond how deeply content he was despite his lingering worries. Her empathic senses stretched across the compound, monitoring the emotional landscape of their pack. Everyone was settled, calm, safe. For tonight, at least, they had peace. Tomorrow, they'd start preparing for battle. But tonight, she was simply a mated Omega in her alpha's arms, complete and claimed and finally truly free. Chapter 8. Morning came with unwelcome news. Axel burst into the strategy room where Sera, Dante, Elena, and Nora had gathered to plan their counteroffensive against the Collector. "We've got incoming," Axel said grimly. 3 separate convoys approaching from different directions. Not the Collector's vehicles. These are marked with official government seals. Dante swore viciously. Omega Protection Services. He went to the authorities. "Can he do that?" Sera asked. "Report us for what exactly?" "For harboring an unregistered Type 7 variant without proper government oversight," Elena said, pulling up the relevant laws on her tablet. "There are regulations about wolves with rare abilities. Technically, they can demand you submit to evaluation and registration." "Over my dead body," Dante snarled. "That might be the idea," Nora said darkly. "If official channels take Sera into custody, the Collector just needs to intercept the transport. Clean, legal, no messy compound assault required." Sera's empathic senses reached out, feeling the approaching presence of dozens of wolves. Not aggressive, exactly, but determined. Official. Backed by legal authority that even Dante's reputation couldn't easily dismiss. "We can't fight the government," she said quietly. "That's different from fighting traffickers. That makes us criminals, makes sanctuary illegal. So what do you suggest?" Dante's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "I suggest," came a new voice from the doorway, "that we give them exactly what they're asking for." Everyone turned to see Elena's contact. A woman Sera had met briefly, introduced only as Doc, who ran one of Sanctuary's satellite medical facilities. "Dr. Carr," Dante said, surprise clear in his voice. "What are you doing here?" "Saving your asses, apparently." Dr. Carr strode into the room with the confidence of someone used to being the smartest person present. "I've been researching Type 7 Omegas since Sera's bonding last night. There are legal loopholes we can exploit." She pulled out a thick folder, spreading documents across the table. "Type 7 evaluations require consent of the Omega's bonded mate. That's you, Dante. You can refuse on her behalf. They'll still try to take her. Not if she's already registered." Dr. Carr smiled. "I have contacts in the Omega Rights Commission, wolves who actually care about protection rather than exploitation. If we voluntarily register Sera before the government convoys arrive, if we document her abilities and prove she's not a threat, we take away their legal justification for forced custody." "And if the Collector intercepts the registration data?" Elena asked. "He already has it. The question is whether the official record lists her as a dangerous unregistered variant being taken into custody, or as a properly registered bonded Omega under the protection of an established sanctuary. One of those scenarios leaves her vulnerable. The other provides legal shield." Sera looked at Dante, feeling through their bond his reluctance to trust bureaucracy, his instinct to fight rather than comply. But she also felt something else, recognition that Dr. Carr might be right. "How long do we have?" Sera asked. "Convoys are 30 minutes out," Axel reported. "Maybe less if they're pushing speed limits. Then we move fast." Dr. Carr pulled out a portable medical scanner. "I need blood samples, full medical workup, documented consent from both mates, and a demonstration of abilities on record. 15 minutes tops." "What kind of demonstration?" Sera asked warily. "Nothing invasive. Just proof that you can sense and read emotional bonds. I'll have Elena and a few other bonded pairs stand in. You identify their connections, we document it, done." It felt wrong, reducing her newly awakened abilities to a clinical demonstration. But through her empathic senses, Sera felt the approaching convoys getting closer, felt the determination of the officials who believed they were protecting public safety by taking her into custody. "Do it," she said. "But on one condition. This registration includes provisions that I can't be separated from my mate or removed from sanctuary without cause." "Already in the documentation," Dr. Carr assured her. "Along with clauses protecting against forced breeding programs, mandatory ability usage, and commercial exploitation. Your rights are ironclad." The next 15 minutes were a blur of activity. Blood draws, medical scans, consent forms signed in triplicate. Sera demonstrated her empathic abilities by correctly identifying 5 bonded pairs, describing the nature and strength of their connections with accuracy that made even skeptical Nora whistle in appreciation. "This is incredible," Dr. Carr murmured, reviewing the data. "Your range is at least a quarter mile, possibly farther. You can differentiate between romantic bonds, pack bonds, and familial connections. And the precision. You described Elena's distant mate bond down to the emotional residue of grief and loss. Is that enough?" Dante asked tersely. The convoys were visible now through the compound's security cameras, pulling up to the main gate. More than enough. Uploading to the Omega Rights Commission now. Dr. Carr's fingers flew across her keyboard. Official registration confirmed. As of this moment, Sera Ashwood Nightshade is a legally recognized and protected Type 7 Omega under the jurisdiction of Sanctuary and the guardianship of her bonded mate. Dante's hand found Sera's, squeezing gently. Through their bond, she felt his relief mixed with lingering anxiety about what came next. The officials at the gate were insistent, professional, armed with documents and authority. Dante met them at the compound entrance with Axel flanking him. Every inch the Alpha who'd built an empire on protecting Omegas from exploitation. "Alpha Nightshade," the lead official said, a stern-faced woman with government insignia on her tactical vest. "We're here to collect Sera Ashwood for evaluation and registration as a potentially dangerous Omega variant." "I'm afraid you're too late," Dante said smoothly. Sera Ashwood Nightshade was voluntarily registered 3 minutes ago through official Omega Rights Commission channels. You can verify with your central database. The official's expression flickered with surprise. She pulled out a tablet, typing rapidly. Her frown deepened as she read whatever came up on the screen. "This is highly irregular. How did you know we were coming?" "We didn't," Dante lied easily. "My mate completed our bonding last night, which triggered her Type 7 abilities. As a responsible Alpha, I immediately contacted medical professionals to ensure proper documentation and registration. Surely you can't fault me for following protocol." The official's lips thinned. "I'll need to speak with the Omega directly. Confirm she registered willingly and wasn't coerced." "Of course." Dante gestured, and Sera stepped forward from where she'd been waiting with Elena and Nora. The official's eyes went immediately to the fresh claiming mark on Sera's neck, visible proof of a completed bond. Her expression softened slightly. "Ms. Ashwood Nightshade," she said, her tone more gentle than it had been with Dante. "I'm Agent Morrison from Omega Protection Services. I need to ask you some questions about your registration." "Ask," Sera said calmly, feeling through her empathic senses that Agent Morrison was genuinely concerned for Omega welfare, not an agent of the Collector's corruption. "Did you voluntarily submit to medical evaluation and registration?" "Yes." "Were you coerced or threatened into bonding with Alpha Nightshade?" "No. I chose him freely, and I'd choose him again without hesitation." "Do you feel safe here at Sanctuary?" Sera let her empathic senses reach out, touching the emotional landscape of the compound behind her. Dozens of Omegas who'd found healing here, who'd rebuilt their lives from shattered pieces, who considered this place home. "I feel safer here than I've felt anywhere in my life," she said honestly. "This isn't a prison or a trafficking operation. It's a sanctuary in the truest sense, a place where broken wolves can heal and become whole again." Agent Morrison studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Your registration is in order, but I'm required to inform you of your rights. If you ever feel unsafe, if you're being exploited or abused, if your abilities are being used against your will, you can contact Omega Protection Services for immediate intervention." "I understand. Thank you." The agent turned back to Dante. "Your sanctuary has an impressive reputation, Alpha Nightshade. But understand this, we'll be monitoring. If there are any reports of Type 7 exploitation, if Ms. Ashwood Nightshade shows signs of coercion, we'll be back with more than just a request for voluntary compliance." "Understood," Dante said. "And Agent Morrison? You might want to check your active case files for Omega trafficking operations in this territory. I believe you'll find that several we've been investigating have connections to someone calling himself the Collector. He's the one who tried to take my mate by force. If you're genuinely interested in Omega protection, he should be your priority target." Something flickered in the agent's eyes, recognition, perhaps, or concern. "We'll look into it. Good day, Alpha Nightshade." The convoy withdrew, leaving behind an exhale of collective relief that Sera felt ripple through the entire compound. "That was too easy," Axel said once they were out of earshot. The collector must have known registration would protect her from official channels. So why did he trigger the government response? Nora wondered. Because, Elena said grimly, he wanted to know if we'd run or fight. Wanted to test our defenses and our connections. Now he knows we have government contacts, he knows the legal protections in place, and he knows exactly what he's up against. Which means his next move will be different, Dante concluded. More direct. More violent. Sera felt it through her empathic senses before anyone else. A shift in the emotional landscape at the compound's perimeter. Not threat, exactly. More like anticipation. Hunger. He's already here, she whispered. Not him directly, but his people. They're watching from the forest, waiting for something. Every alpha in the vicinity went on high alert. Dante's hand went to the weapon at his hip, while Axel barked orders into his radio for security teams to mobilize. How many? Dante asked. Sera closed her eyes, letting her new abilities stretch farther than she'd attempted before. She could feel them, cold presences with muted emotional signatures, trained to suppress their natural scent and emotional output. 8, maybe 10, spread around the perimeter. They're not planning an assault. She frowned, trying to interpret what she was sensing. They're planning an extraction. They're waiting for me to leave the compound. Then you don't leave, Dante said flatly. Eventually I'll have to, Sera countered. We can't live our entire lives trapped inside these walls. That's just another cage. So we set a trap, Nora said, her smile sharp. Let them think they have an opportunity. Then crush them when they make their move. Using my mate as bait, Dante's voice was cold. Using your mate as a partner in dismantling the trafficking network threatening her, Sera corrected. You said you wanted to fight beside me, not in front of me. This is what that looks like. Through their bond, she felt his war between protective instincts and respect for her agency. The same battle he'd been fighting since the moment they met. We do this smart, he said finally. Controlled environment. Overwhelming backup. Exit strategies. Always, Sera agreed. Dr. Carr cleared her throat. If you're planning an operation, you should know. The collector isn't just interested in acquiring you, Sera. Based on the research I've been doing, Type 7 omegas were historically used to create something called forced bonds. Artificial mate connections that could control wolves against their will. The room went silent. That's why he wants her, Elena whispered. Not just for her value as a rare omega, but for what he could do with her abilities. He could build an empire of controlled wolves, forcing bonds and breaking them at will. Over my dead body, Dante snarled. That's probably also part of his plan, Dr. Carr said apologetically. Kill the bonded mate, and a Type 7's abilities become unstable, easier to manipulate and control. Sera felt ice settle in her stomach. The collector wasn't just hunting her. He was planning to murder Dante, break her through grief, and weaponize her abilities to enslave other wolves. Then we end him first, she said, her voice steady despite the fear churning through her. Before he can hurt anyone else. Before he can destroy what we've built here. Dante's arms came around her from behind, and through their bond, she felt his absolute determination to protect her matched by her own fierce resolve to protect him right back. Tomorrow, he said. We set the trap tomorrow. Tonight we prepare. As the group dispersed to make plans and ready defenses, Sera leaned back against her mate's solid warmth and let her empathic senses stretch across sanctuary one more time. She could feel the love here, the bonds between wolves who'd found family after trauma. Could sense the hope that sanctuary represented, not just for those currently healing, but for all the omegas still trapped in situations like the one she'd escaped. The collector wanted to destroy this, wanted to take what made her special and twist it into a weapon of enslavement. But Sera Ashwood Nightshade was done being anyone's victim. Tomorrow, they'd show the collector what happened when you threatened a bonded pair who'd learned to fight together. Tomorrow they'd end this. Tonight, they'd hold on to each other, and the hope that love could triumph over even the darkest threats. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Chapter 9. The trap was elegantly simple. Sera would leave Sanctuary for a supply run to the nearest town, accompanied only by Nora in a civilian vehicle. To any observers, it would look like a moment of vulnerability, the valuable Omega outside the compound's protection with minimal security. In reality, a dozen of Dante's best fighters would be hidden in the transport, with 2 more vehicles following at a distance. Sera's empathic abilities would give them advance warning of any attack, and Dante himself would be in position to respond within seconds. "I don't like this," Dante said for the 15th time as Sera prepared to leave. They stood in his quarters, and through their bond, she felt his barely controlled anxiety. "You don't have to like it," she replied gently. "You just have to trust me." "I do trust you. It's the collector I don't trust." "Then trust that we're smarter than him. Trust that my abilities give us an advantage he doesn't know about." She cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Trust that I'm not the helpless Omega he thinks I am." Through their bond, she pushed all her confidence, all her determination, all her fierce certainty that this would work. Dante's resistance crumbled. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. "If anything goes wrong, you'll be there in seconds." "I know." She kissed him softly. "Now let me go save our future." The drive into town was tense despite the casual appearance they were trying to project. Sera sat in the passenger seat while Nora drove, both of them hyper-aware of the hidden fighters in the back of the transport and the trail vehicles maintaining careful distance behind them. "Feel anything?" Nora asked quietly. Sera let her empathic senses stretch out, searching for the cold, muted presences she'd felt watching the compound. Nothing yet. Just the normal emotional landscape of wolves going about their day in the small mountain town ahead. Not yet, but they're patient. They'll wait for the right moment. That moment came 20 minutes later, as they were loading supplies into the transport in the town's parking lot. Sera felt it like a sudden chill. For presences moving with predatory purpose, closing in from multiple angles. "For approaching," she said quietly, low enough that only Nora and the hidden fighters could hear through their communication devices. "From the north, west, and south." Classic pincer movement. "Copy that," came Axel's voice through Nora's earpiece. "Hold position. Let them commit." The attack came fast. 3 wolves in human form, moving with professional efficiency, attempting to grab Sera and force her into a waiting vehicle. They were good, well-trained, coordinated, clearly experienced in Omega extractions. But they weren't expecting Nora's combat skills, honed through years of working for Dante. They definitely weren't expecting 6 fighters to explode from the back of the transport. And they absolutely weren't prepared for Sera herself. The moment one of them touched her arm, Sera's empathic abilities flared. She could feel his emotions. Cold professionalism mixed with anticipation of a large payout. Could sense through him the location of the 4th attacker, still hidden, providing overwatch. "Sniper," she gasped. "Rooftop 2 buildings east." The 4th attacker's emotional signature shifted from patient observation to panic as he realized he'd been made. He fired anyway, a tranquilizer dart meant to incapacitate Sera without damaging valuable merchandise. But Dante was faster. He appeared as if from nowhere, his black wolf form intercepting the dart midair and crashing into the sniper's position with devastating force. Through their bond, Sera felt his fury, his protective rage, his absolute determination that nothing would harm his mate. The fight was over in under a minute. 3 attackers subdued and restrained, the 4th limping down from the rooftop under Dante's intimidating presence. "Well," Nora said cheerfully, surveying the scene. "That went well." One of the subdued attackers, a scarred beta with calculating eyes, laughed harshly. "You think this changes anything? The collector has dozens of teams. You can't protect her forever." "We don't need forever," Sera said, moving to stand over him. "We just need long enough." She let her empathic abilities focus on him, reading through his emotional landscape like an open book. "You're not loyal to the collector. You're terrified of him. He's got something on you, family maybe? Someone you love that he's threatening if you don't deliver." The beta's eyes widened in shock and fear. "I can feel it," Sera continued gently. "The guilt, the desperation, the hatred of what you're being forced to do. What if I told you there was another way? That sanctuary protects wolves being coerced into trafficking operations." "He'd kill them," the beta whispered. "My sister and her pup. He's got them in a facility somewhere. If I don't deliver you." "Then we find them first," Dante said, shifting back to human form. "Tell us where the facility is, and I'll mount a rescue operation personally." The beta stared at him, clearly torn between hope and disbelief. "Why would you help me? I just tried to kidnap your mate." "Because," Sera said softly, feeling through their bond Dante's instant understanding and agreement. "That's what we do. We break the chains traffickers use to control wolves." All wolves, even the ones forced to work for them. Through her empathic senses, she felt the exact moment the beta's resistance crumbled, replaced by desperate hope. "The Crescent Valley facility," he said. 20 miles north of here. He's got at least 30 captives there, using them as leverage against family members in his organization. Dante and Axel exchanged sharp looks. "That's one of the locations we've been trying to pinpoint for months," Axel said. "Then now we know," Dante replied. He turned to the beta. "You're going to tell us everything, layout, security, staffing. And then you're going to help us plan the raid. And my sister? We'll be free by nightfall if we do this right." The beta nodded, something like hope flickering in his eyes for the first time. As Dante's team secured the prisoners and began extracting intel, Sera felt another presence approaching. This one familiar and far more dangerous. "He's here," she whispered. "The collector himself. He's close." Dante was at her side instantly, his body a shield between her and the threat she sensed. "Where?" "Coming from the east. He's alone, or at least I only feel one presence." She frowned, trying to interpret what her abilities were telling her. "He's not planning to attack. He wants to talk. It's a trap. Maybe. But maybe it's an opportunity." Before Dante could argue, a sleek black car pulled into the parking lot. The collector emerged with theatrical calm, his silver hair gleaming in the afternoon sun, hands visibly empty of weapons. "Alpha Nightshade," he called out. "I believe we need to have a conversation." "We have nothing to discuss," Dante snarled. "Oh, I think we do." The collector's smile was cold. "You've captured 4 of my operatives. I've lost a significant investment. And your mate," his eyes found Sera, "has just demonstrated abilities that make her even more valuable than I initially calculated. She's not for sale. Everything's for sale, Alpha Nightshade. It's just a matter of finding the right price." He pulled out a tablet, displaying images that made Sera's blood run cold. "For instance, what's the price for the safety of the 43 Omega residents currently at your sanctuary? What about the 3 satellite facilities you've been running secretly? Or the underground railroad network helping Omegas escape trafficking situations?" Through her empathic senses, Sera felt Dante's fury spike dangerously. The collector had been gathering intelligence, building leverage, preparing for this exact moment. "You threaten my people, and I'll burn your entire operation to ash," Dante said, his voice deadly calm. "I'm sure you would. But how many Omegas die in the crossfire while you're playing hero? How many of your precious rescued wolves get caught in the destruction?" The collector's smile widened. "I'm offering you a trade. 1 Omega, admittedly a very special one, for the safety of dozens. Seems like simple math to me." "No." The single word came from Sera. She stepped around Dante, ignoring his attempt to pull her back, and faced the collector with steady eyes. "You're not taking me," she said calmly. "Not today, not ever. And you're not threatening Sanctuary or any of the wolves under our protection." "Brave words from a newly bonded Omega," the collector said. "But you don't understand what you are, what you're capable of. I've studied Type 7 variants for decades. I know how to unlock your full potential, how to enhance your abilities beyond anything you've imagined. By killing my mate and breaking me with grief?" Sera's voice was sharp. "Dr. Carr warned us about your plans." The collector's expression flickered with annoyance. She always was too intelligent for her own good. "Yes, severing your bond would make your abilities easier to control. But I'm not unreasonable. I could offer your mate a position in my organization instead. You could stay bonded, work together, and both profit from my resources." Through her empathic senses, Sera felt the lie beneath his words. He had no intention of letting Dante live. The offer was manipulation, a way to buy time or create division. "Here's my counteroffer," Sera said. "You surrender. Voluntarily. Give yourself up to Omega Protection Services, provide evidence against every trafficking operation you're connected to, and accept whatever punishment the legal system determines." The collector actually laughed. "And why would I do that?" "Because if you don't," Sera's voice dropped, and she let her empathic abilities flare visibly, frost forming in the air around her in patterns that shouldn't be possible. "I'm going to use these abilities you're so fascinated by to destroy you. I can feel your emotions, collector. I can sense your fears, your weaknesses, your every psychological vulnerability. And I'm going to exploit every single one until you're a broken shell begging for mercy you'll never receive." The temperature in the parking lot plummeted. Through her bond with Dante, Sera drew on his strength, his alpha power, amplifying her abilities in ways she was only beginning to understand. The collector's confident facade cracked. "You're bluffing. You don't know how to weaponize emotional manipulation." "Don't I?" Sera focused on him, reading through his emotional landscape with invasive precision. "You're terrified of being alone. Abandoned. That's why you collect wolves, surround yourself with controlled pawns. Your father left when you were young, and your mother blamed you. You've spent your entire life trying to fill that void by controlling others, by building an empire of forced loyalty, because you're incapable of earning genuine connection." The collector's face had gone pale. "Stop. You can't sleep without sedatives because of nightmares about dying alone, unmourned, forgotten. You've built this criminal empire, accumulated wealth and power, and you're still just a scared child afraid that nobody will love you if they're not forced to." "I said stop." The collector's composure shattered completely. Sera let the empathic pressure ease, though she kept her abilities ready. "That's a fraction of what I can do. Imagine that invasiveness turned into a weapon. Imagine me broadcasting your deepest fears to every wolf in your organization, destroying your mystique, your authority, your power base with nothing but emotional truth." The parking lot was silent except for the sound of the collector's ragged breathing. "You think you're the only one who's studied Type 7 Omegas?" Sera continued. "I've spent the last 24 hours learning about my abilities from Dr. Carr and Elena, learning what my great-great-grandmother could do before she chose to hide her gifts. I can break bonds, Collector. I can sever the connections between mates, destroy pack loyalty, turn your most faithful servants against you with just a touch and a focused intention." It was partially bluff. She didn't actually know if she could do all those things yet. But through her empathic reading, she could feel the collector's belief that she could, and that was enough. "So here's what's going to happen," Dante said, moving to stand beside Sera in a united front. "You're going to walk away. You're going to dismantle your trafficking operations. And you're going to pray that we don't decide to come after you anyway. And if I refuse, then we demonstrate exactly what a bonded Type 7 Omega and her mate can do when they stop holding back," Sera said simply. "Your choice." The collector stood there for a long moment, and Sera could feel through her empathic senses the calculations running through his mind. Pride versus survival. Investment versus self-preservation. Finally, slowly, he nodded. "This isn't over." "Yes," Dante said quietly. "It is. You just don't know it yet." The collector returned to his vehicle and drove away, leaving behind a stunned silence. "Did that actually just work?" Nora asked incredulously. "For now," Sera said, suddenly exhausted. The empathic display had taken more out of her than she'd expected. "But he'll regroup, plan something new. He's too invested to just walk away permanently." "Then we use the time he's given us," Dante said, his arm coming around her waist to steady her. "We raid the Crescent Valley facility tonight, free the captives, and start dismantling his leverage piece by piece." Through their bond, Sera felt his fierce pride in her, his awe at what she'd just accomplished, and his absolute determination to keep her safe while respecting her strength. "Together?" she asked. "Always together," he confirmed. As they loaded back into the vehicles to return to Sanctuary and plan the evening's raid, Sera felt a shift in the emotional landscape around them. The hidden fighters were looking at her differently now. Not as a victim to be protected, but as a powerful ally who'd just faced down one of the most dangerous traffickers in existence and won. She was finally becoming who she was meant to be. Not broken, not helpless, not ordinary. Just Sera, bonded Omega, Type 7 empath, partner to the Dark Alpha, and someone who'd learned that survival was its own kind of strength. The war wasn't over. The collector would try again, and there would be other threats, other battles, other wolves who saw her abilities as something to exploit. But for the first time since her father sold her into captivity, Sera felt ready for whatever came next. Because she wasn't facing it alone. She had a mate, a pack, and powers she was only beginning to understand. And that she was learning made all the difference. Chapter 10. The Crescent Valley facility raid was launched at dusk, when the changing light would make surveillance difficult, and the Skeleton Knight crew would be settling in. Dante had assembled 24 fighters, his most experienced team members, along with several rescued Omegas who'd completed combat training and volunteered to help free others like them. Sera insisted on being part of the assault team, despite Dante's very vocal objections. "My empathic abilities give us a tactical advantage," she argued as they suited up in tactical gear. I can sense guards before we encounter them, identify which captives are injured or in crisis, even potentially calm panicking Omegas during the extraction. You can do all that from the command vehicle, Dante countered, checking her vest with excessive thoroughness. I could, but I won't. She caught his hands, stilling his nervous adjustments. Dante, I need to do this. Need to be part of freeing wolves from the same kind of captivity I survived. Please understand. Through their bond, she felt his war between protective instincts and respect for her autonomy. The same battle that had defined their relationship from the beginning. Fine, he said finally. But you stay with me. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. The moment I say we pull back, we pull back. Understood. Understood. The facility was located in what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse, its dilapidated exterior hiding the security systems and reinforced interior that kept captives contained. Sera's empathic senses reached out as they approached, mapping the emotional landscape. 32 presences inside, she whispered. 28 feel like captives, fear, resignation, hopelessness. For our different guards, I think. Cold, alert, professional. For guards for 28 captives? Axel sounded suspicious. That seems light for a collector operation. Unless, Sera said slowly, reading deeper into the emotional signatures, most of the captives aren't physically restrained. They're staying because of leverage. Family members being threatened, children held hostage elsewhere, that kind of thing. Which makes this both easier and harder, Nora muttered. Easy to access them, hard to convince them to leave. The raid went smoothly at first. Dante's team moved with practiced efficiency, neutralizing the guards with minimal violence and breaching the facility's main holding area. What they found made even hardened fighters pause in horror. The warehouse interior had been converted into a makeshift prison, with cages lining the walls and Omegas in various states of physical and psychological trauma. But it was the children that hit hardest, pups as young as 4 or 5, being held to ensure their parents' cooperation in the collector's various operations. Mama, a small voice cried out, and the scarred beta from the parking lot, the one who'd given them the facility location, rushed past security protocols to reach a cage where a frightened woman and small child huddled together. Katia, Alex. The beta's voice broke as he reached through the bars to touch his sister and nephew. I'm getting you out. I promise. Sera moved through the facility, using her empathic abilities to identify who needed immediate medical attention, who was on the verge of panic, who could walk out on their own power versus who needed carrying. The emotional weight of so much suffering pressed against her senses like physical pressure. But Dante's steady presence through their bond kept her anchored. We've got a problem, one of the scouts called out. There's a sealed section in the back. Heavy security, separate from the main holding area. Sera's empathic senses stretched toward that section and found something that made her blood run cold. There are Omegas back there, but their emotional signatures are wrong. Muted, suppressed, like they've been chemically altered. Breeding program, Elena said grimly, appearing beside them with a medical kit. The collector's been rumored to run forced breeding operations for rare bloodlines. I'd bet anything that's what we're looking at. Dante's fury through the bond was incandescent. Get them out. All of them. Now. The sealed section required Axel's explosives expertise to breach, but when they finally got the doors open, what they found was somehow worse than expected. 8 Omega females, all showing signs of recent pregnancy or nursing, all kept in a drugged, compliant state that made Sera's stomach turn. This was worse than simple captivity. This was breeding slavery, reducing Omegas to nothing more than vessels for producing rare bloodline pups. Goddess, Nora whispered. How long have they been like this? Long enough that we're going to have trouble bringing them back, Elena said, already moving to assess the nearest Omega. This level of chemical suppression, the psychological conditioning, recovery will take months, maybe years. Then we have months and years, Dante said flatly. Get them stabilized for transport. They're coming home with us. That's when Sera felt it, a new presence approaching the facility. Multiple presences, actually. At least 20 heavily armed wolves moving with military precision. We have incoming, she said urgently. 20+ hostiles. They knew we were coming. Dante swore viciously. It's a trap. The collector expected us to raid after he gave up the location. Not a trap, came a familiar voice from the facility's entrance. Agent Morrison from Omega Protection Services stepped into view, backed by a full tactical team. A coordinated operation. We've been investigating the collector for months, Alpha Nightshade. When your beta gave us the location of this facility, we decided it was time to move. Relief flooded through Sera's empathic senses. These weren't collector enforcers. They were legitimate authorities, actually doing their jobs for once. How did you know we'd be here tonight? Dante asked warily. Because I know you, Agent Morrison said simply. And because Dr. Carr contacted us this morning with enough evidence to secure multiple warrants. The collector's operation is being dismantled as we speak. 6 facilities raided simultaneously, over 200 captives freed. The scope of it took Sera's breath away. While they'd been planning one rescue, law enforcement had been planning a coordinated strike against the entire trafficking network. The collector? Dante asked. In custody, along with 43 of his key operatives. Agent Morrison's smile was fierce. He's not walking away from this one. The next several hours were a controlled chaos of medical evacuations, evidence collection, and witness statements. Sera moved through it all in a daze, her empathic abilities overwhelmed by the sheer volume of emotional trauma being processed. It was near midnight when they finally returned to Sanctuary with the freed captives, including the Beta's sister and nephew, the 8 breeding program Omegas, and a dozen others who had nowhere else to go. How do we handle this? Sera asked Dante as they watched medical teams triage the new arrivals. We're already at capacity, and some of these wolves need more intensive care than we can provide. Then we expand, Dante said simply. Build more facilities, hire more staff, reach out to allied packs for support. We figured out how to save 30 captives tonight. We can figure out how to heal them too. Through their bond, Sera felt his absolute determination matched by an edge of exhaustion she recognized in herself. They'd won tonight, struck a major blow against trafficking operations. But the cost was visible in every traumatized face, every Omega who flinched from gentle touch, every child who'd witnessed horrors no pup should ever see. We can't save everyone, she said quietly. No, Dante agreed. But we can save the ones in front of us. That has to be enough. Elena found them an hour later in Dante's office, both of them too wired to sleep despite their exhaustion. Thought you should know. Agent Morrison wants to offer us a formal partnership. Resources, legal authority, government backing for Sanctuary's operations. In exchange for what? Dante asked suspiciously. In exchange for continued cooperation on trafficking investigations and consultation on Omega protection protocols. Elena's smile was tired but genuine. Turns out having a Type 7 empath on our side made quite an impression. Morrison thinks Sera could revolutionize how they identify and rescue trafficking victims. Sera's first instinct was to refuse. She'd just gotten her abilities, was barely learning to control them, and the idea of working formally with authorities felt like a trap. But through her empathic senses, she felt the sincerity in Elena's emotional signature. This was a genuine offer from people who actually wanted to help. I'll consider it, she said finally, but I'm not becoming anyone's weapon. If I consult, it's on my terms with my mate beside me, and only for operations that align with Sanctuary's mission. I'll relay that to Morrison, Elena said. She expected no less. After Elena left, Sera and Dante sat in comfortable silence, processing the events of the night. Through their bond, she felt his exhaustion mixed with satisfaction, the feeling of a mission accomplished, even if the war was far from over. You were incredible tonight, he said finally. The way you coordinated the rescue, helped identify who needed priority care, kept everyone calm during the extraction. I had a good team, she deflected, uncomfortable with the praise. No. He turned to face her, his dark eyes intense. You led tonight, Sera. Maybe not officially, but every decision we made was better because of your input. Every Omega we saved benefited from your abilities. I just did what needed doing. Exactly. His smile was soft. That's what makes you extraordinary. Not the powers, though those are incredible, but the fact that you survived hell and came out determined to prevent others from experiencing the same. Through their bond, she felt his absolute sincerity, his bone-deep pride in her, his wonder at how lucky he was to have her as his mate. I love you, she said, the words coming easily for the first time. I know we've only been bonded a short time, but Dante, I love you. Not because you saved me, but because of who you are. What you've built. How you see me. His hands cupped her face with infinite gentleness. I love you too. From that first moment in the basement, even when I was terrified of the bond, I think part of me knew you were it for me. They kissed, slow and sweet and full of promises about the future they were building together. When they finally pulled apart, Dante said, Agent Morrison mentioned something interesting. With the collectors' network dismantled, there's going to be a power vacuum in the trafficking world. Other operations will try to fill it, which means our work isn't done. No, he agreed. But maybe we approach it differently. Not just reactive rescues, but proactive prevention. Use your abilities to identify trafficking operations before they can establish themselves. Work with authorities to create real consequences for traffickers. Build something bigger than sanctuary. Build a network, a movement, a world where omegas like you never have to experience what you survived. Through her empathic senses, Sera could feel the vision taking shape between them. Not just one compound, but a coordinated effort across territories. Not just rescue operations, but systemic change. It'll be dangerous, she said. Everything worthwhile is dangerous. And exhausting. We'll face it together. And probably impossible. Then we'll do the impossible. His smile was fierce and proud. We're already doing it, Sera. We freed over 200 captives tonight. Brought down one of the most powerful trafficking networks in existence. Proved that a bonded pair can be stronger than any individual threat. She leaned into his warmth, letting the bond between them pulse with shared determination and hope. What happens now? She asked. Now we rest. Tomorrow we start figuring out how to integrate 30 traumatized wolves into sanctuary. Next week we meet with Agent Morrison about the partnership. Next month we start planning how to expand our network. And tonight, we remember that we're not just warriors fighting a war. We're mates who found each other despite impossible odds. We're partners building a future. We're two wolves who refuse to let trauma define them. Sera closed her eyes, feeling through her empathic abilities the emotional landscape of sanctuary settling into peaceful sleep around them. Omegas who'd found safety. Fighters who'd chosen purpose over revenge. Rescued wolves beginning the long journey toward healing. This was what they'd built. This was what they were protecting. And tomorrow they'd build more. Chapter 11. 3 weeks after the collector's arrest, Sanctuary had transformed again. The 30 new residents were slowly integrating, with varying degrees of success. Some, like the Beta's sister Katia, were adapting quickly, grateful for safety and eager to rebuild their lives. Others, particularly the 8 Omegas from the breeding program, needed intensive therapy and medical care that pushed Sanctuary's resources to their limits. Sera spent most of her time working with Dr. Carr and Elena, using her empathic abilities to assess emotional states and track healing progress. It was exhausting, overwhelming work that left her drained by the end of each day. You're pushing too hard, Dante said, finding her in the medical wing long after she should have been asleep. Again. There's too much to do, Sera replied, not looking up from the case file she was reviewing. Maya hasn't spoken since we rescued her. Jenna has nightmares every night that wake up half the Omega wing. And Thomas. We'll all still need help tomorrow, Dante interrupted gently. After you've rested. You can't heal everyone at once, love. I can try. You can burn yourself out trying, and then be no help to anyone. He moved behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders and kneading tense muscles. Elena's worried. Dr. Carr is worried. I'm worried. Through their bond, Sera felt his concern mixed with frustration. She knew she was pushing herself too hard, using her abilities too frequently, taking on too much emotional weight from the wolves she was trying to help. But every time she tried to rest, she felt the suffering of the captives they'd rescued, felt their fear, their pain, their desperate need for healing she could help provide. What if we can't help them? She whispered. What if some of them are too broken? Dante came around to face her, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. Then we help them be broken. We give them space to heal at their own pace, without pressure to be fixed. We let them know they're worth caring for even if they never fully recover. The words hit something deep in Sera's chest. Wasn't that what she'd needed? Not someone to fix her, but someone to accept her as she was. Damaged but not destroyed, scarred but still strong? I'm scared, she admitted. Scared that my abilities aren't enough. That I'm not enough. You're more than enough, Dante said firmly. But you're also just one wolf. That's why we have Elena, Dr. Carr, the therapy team, the support groups. You don't have to carry all this alone. Through their bond, she felt his absolute certainty, his unshakable faith in her even when she doubted herself. Okay, she said finally. I'll try to pace myself better. Take breaks. Actually sleep occasionally. Revolutionary concept, he teased, then sobered. Speaking of which, Agent Morrison wants to meet tomorrow. Something about a new trafficking operation she wants our help investigating. Sera groaned. We just finished dismantling the last one, which is why she wants us. Apparently, word spread about the Type 7 Omega who helped coordinate the collector's takedown. Other law enforcement agencies are requesting consultation. I'm not sure I'm ready for that. Then tell Morrison no. We're partners in this, Sera. You don't have to take on every mission just because someone asks. The permission to refuse, to set boundaries, to prioritize her own well-being. It was still new enough to feel like a gift. Let me meet with her first, Sera said. Hear what she's asking. Then we'll decide together. Dante's smile was warm with approval. Together. I like the sound of that. The next morning's meeting with Agent Morrison revealed a situation more complex than Sera expected. The agent arrived with folders full of evidence and a grim expression that spoke of sleepless nights. We have a problem, Morrison said without preamble. The collector's arrest created exactly the power vacuum Alpha Nightshade predicted. 3 major trafficking operations are expanding to fill it, and they're all competing for territory and resources. She spread photographs across the conference table. Images of facilities, surveillance footage, maps marking suspected locations. This is escalating fast, Axel observed. Turf wars, probably violence as they fight for dominance. Already happening, Morrison confirmed. 2 Omega facilities were raided by competing syndicates in the past week. For captives killed in the crossfire, dozens more injured. Sera's empathic abilities flared instinctively, even though she was nowhere near the victims. The emotional weight of their suffering seemed to echo through the evidence itself. What do you need from us? Dante asked. Intelligence, primarily. Sera's abilities could help us identify facilities, assess threat levels, even potentially communicate with captives before we mount rescues. Morrison's gaze was direct. I know it's a lot to ask, but we're talking about hundreds of Omegas caught in the middle of a gang war. Without better intel, we're going in blind. How would it work? Sera asked. I can't just sense trafficking victims from miles away. My range is limited, and using my abilities that intensively for extended periods is exhausting. We'd bring you to suspected locations. Close enough for your abilities to work, but not so close you're in danger. Just long enough to confirm whether captives are present and assess their condition. That's still putting her at risk, Dante objected. Less risk than mounting raids on empty facilities or wrong locations, Morrison countered. Less risk than captives being killed because we couldn't get accurate intel fast enough. The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Sera felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Accept and help save captives while potentially putting herself in danger, or refuse and know that her abilities could have prevented deaths. Through her bond with Dante, she felt his internal struggle. He wanted to protect her, wanted to say no, wanted to keep her safe inside Sanctuary's walls where nothing could hurt her. But he also respected her agency enough not to make the decision for her. I'll do it, Sera said finally. With conditions. Morrison leaned forward. Name them. First, Dante comes with me. Always. No exceptions. Agreed. Second, I'm not an employee or a tool. I'm a consultant who can refuse specific missions if they feel wrong. Understood. Third, any Omega facilities we identify get raided within 72 hours maximum. I'm not providing intelligence for operations that get delayed for political reasons while captives suffer. Morrison's lips quirked in what might have been approval. That one's harder to guarantee, but I'll do my best. Then we have a deal. Sera looked at Dante. If you're okay with it. Through their bond, she felt his resignation mixed with pride. I hate it, but I understand why you're doing it. Because someone has to, Sera said quietly, echoing the words he'd used to explain his own mission months ago. And I have abilities that can actually help. The first consultation mission happened 2 days later. Morrison had identified a suspected facility in the industrial district, an abandoned factory that surveillance suggested was being used for Omega captivity. Sera and Dante approached in an unmarked vehicle, with Morrison and her tactical team maintaining distance in case things went wrong. As they got within range, Sera let her empathic abilities stretch out carefully. There are people inside, she confirmed. 12. No, 14 emotional signatures. Most feel like captives: fear, resignation, hopelessness. Can you tell if they're Omegas specifically? Morrison asked through the comm system. Sera focused deeper. Yes, all Omega signatures. And she frowned, sensing something unusual. There are pups. At least 3 children under 10. Morrison swore. That complicates extraction. Okay, we're green-lighting the raid for tonight. Sera, can you identify if any captives need immediate medical attention? Sera pushed her abilities further, trying to read individual emotional states. One signature felt wrong. Muted, fading, like a candle burning down to nothing. Northwest corner of the building, she said urgently. Someone's dying. Critically injured or ill. I can't tell which. If you're raiding tonight, they need medical evac immediately. Copy that. We'll prioritize that section. The raid went smoothly. Morrison's team was professional and efficient, with medical personnel on standby. The Omega Sera had sensed in critical condition turned out to be a 19-year-old who'd been beaten so severely she'd developed internal bleeding. According to medical personnel, another few hours and she wouldn't have survived. You saved her life, Morrison said as they watched the medical transport leave. Your abilities identified someone we wouldn't have known to prioritize. Through her bond, Sera felt Dante's mixture of pride and worry. Using her abilities so intensively had left her exhausted, with a headache building behind her eyes. How many more of these do you need? Dante asked Morrison pointedly. We have 4 more suspected facilities to assess. After that, we should have enough intel to coordinate simultaneous raids that will cripple all 3 competing syndicates. For more missions. For more times pushing her abilities to their limits. For more chances for something to go wrong. But also 4 more facilities full of captives who might die without accurate intelligence. For more chances to prevent the kind of suffering she'd experienced. I can do 4 more, Sera said, ignoring Dante's concerned look. But then I need a break. Time to recover and figure out sustainable ways to use these abilities without burning myself out. Fair enough, Morrison agreed. We'll space them out over 2 weeks. Give you recovery time between missions. As they drove back to Sanctuary, Dante's worry pressed against her through their bond like a physical weight. I know what you're going to say, Sera said tiredly. Do you? Because I'm about to say I'm proud of you and terrified for you in equal measure. I can handle it. I know you can. That doesn't mean I have to like watching you push yourself to exhaustion for strangers. They're not strangers. They're me 3 months ago. They're every Omega who's ever been trapped and hopeless and praying someone will care enough to help. Dante was quiet for a long moment. You're right. I just wish saving them didn't require you to sacrifice so much of yourself. It's not a sacrifice, Sera said softly. It's a choice. Maybe the first truly free choice I've made since my father sold me. I'm choosing to use my abilities to help. Choosing to be part of the solution instead of just another victim who survived. Through their bond, she felt his understanding, even if his protective instincts still screamed against the danger. Okay, he said finally. We do this together. But Sera, promise me, if it becomes too much, if using your abilities starts damaging you, you'll tell me. You'll stop. I promise. It was a promise she'd test sooner than either of them expected. Chapter 12. The 4th consultation mission went wrong. Sera and Dante were assessing a suspected facility in the warehouse district when her empathic senses detected something that made her blood run cold. It's a trap, she gasped. Morrison, pull back, it's a trap. But her warning came seconds too late. The building they were surveilling erupted with gunfire as heavily armed wolves emerged from concealed positions, targeting Morrison's tactical team. Go! Dante yelled, throwing their vehicle into reverse. But more attackers had moved to cut off their escape route, boxing them in with coordinated precision. Through her empathic abilities, Sera could feel them. Dozens of hostile presences, all emanating cold purpose and violent intent. This wasn't a trafficking facility. It was an ambush specifically designed to capture her. They knew we were coming, she said, her heart racing. Someone told them about our consultation missions. Dante was already on the comm, calling for backup from Sanctuary. But even Axel's team would need 20 minutes to arrive. 20 minutes they probably didn't have. Stay in the vehicle, Dante ordered. No matter what happens, you stay in. The window beside Sera exploded inward. A tranquilizer dart buried itself in her shoulder before she could react, and the world immediately began to gray at the edges. Sera! Dante's roar was the last thing she heard before darkness claimed her. She woke to pain and the smell of blood. Not hers. Through her empathic abilities, she could feel the suffering of others nearby. Lots of others. Sera forced her eyes open and found herself in a cage. Again, after everything, after rescue and healing and becoming powerful, she was right back where she'd started, captive and helpless. Ah, our guest of honor awakens. The voice made her skin crawl. Not the collector. He was in federal custody. But someone with the same cold, calculating tone. A woman appeared in front of the cage. Elegant, dangerous, with ice-blue eyes that held no warmth. I'm Vera Blackwater, the collector's sister. You cost me a very profitable brother. I'm here to collect payment. Where's Dante? Sera's voice came out hoarse. Your mate. Vera smiled cruelly. Fighting for his life about 2 floors up. We kept him alive because Type 7 Omegas are so much more cooperative when their bonded mates are being tortured. Basic psychology, really. Through the bond, Sera reached out desperately. She found Dante, injured, furious, fighting against restraints while someone hurt him methodically. The echo of his pain through their connection made her gasp. Stop, she begged. Please stop hurting him. Then cooperate. Demonstrate your abilities for my researchers. Let us study how your empathic senses work. Help us figure out how to replicate them in other Omega bloodlines. You want to weaponize Type 7 abilities. Sera's understanding came with cold dread. Create controlled empaths who can manipulate bonds for profit. Now you're catching on. Vera gestured, and several wolves in lab coats approached the cage. We've already had moderate success with chemical enhancement of natural abilities. But a true Type 7? That's the breakthrough we need. I won't help you enslave other Omegas. Vera's expression hardened. Then your mate dies. Slowly, painfully, while you listen to his screams through your precious bond. As if to demonstrate, Dante's pain spiked sharply through their connection. Sera cried out, doubling over as the agony ricocheted through her empathic senses. See how easy that was. Vera said pleasantly. Now imagine days of that. Weeks. How long before you break and give me what I want? Through the bond, Sera felt Dante's desperate message. Don't do it. Don't give them anything. I can take it. But could she take it? Could she endure feeling her mate tortured while refusing to cooperate? Then Sera remembered something Dr. Carr had said during their research into Type 7 abilities. The most dangerous thing about empathic Omegas wasn't what they could sense. It was what they could project. If she could read emotions, feel bonds, sense psychological vulnerabilities, couldn't she also broadcast them? Okay, she said, letting defeat color her voice. I'll cooperate. Just stop hurting him. Vera smiled triumphantly. Excellent choice. Let's start with a simple demonstration. I'm going to bring in several bonded pairs. You'll identify their mate bonds and describe them in detail. As the researchers prepared their equipment, Sera reached out through her empathic abilities in a way she never had before. Not sensing emotions, projecting them. She focused on Vera first, reading through her emotional landscape and finding every insecurity, every fear, every wound that had never healed. Then she amplified them, broadcasting them back with empathic intensity. Vera stumbled, her confident expression cracking. What did you do? Just giving you what you wanted, Sera said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. You wanted to see my abilities? You wanted to understand how empathic projection works? Here's a demonstration. She pushed harder, forcing Vera to feel every terrible thing she'd ever done, every life she'd destroyed, every Omega she'd helped enslave. The guilt and horror that Vera had spent years suppressing came flooding back with devastating intensity. Vera screamed. The researchers rushed to their boss, but Sera had already shifted her focus to them. Through her empathic senses, she found the moral reservations they'd been ignoring, the horror at what they were participating in, the knowledge that their research would enslave innocents. She amplified it all. Within seconds, 3 of the 5 researchers were on their knees, sobbing with guilt. The other 2 ran for the exits, unable to cope with the emotional onslaught. Guards rushed in, weapons raised. But Sera was already reaching for them with her abilities, finding their bonds. To mates, to pups, to families they'd left behind to work for Vera's operation. She showed them what would happen if their loved ones were caught in the trafficking operations they protected, .it was the most ruthless thing she'd ever done, weaponizing empathy itself, using her abilities to break minds instead of heal them. But she was trapped, Dante was being tortured, and Morrison's team was under attack. Mercy was a luxury she couldn't afford. The facility descended into chaos as guards turned on each other. Researchers fled in horror, and Vera curled into a ball, overwhelmed by emotional feedback she couldn't process. Sera used the distraction to work on her cage lock with shaking hands. The tranquilizer was still in her system, making her movements clumsy, but desperation lent her strength. The lock broke. She stumbled out, her legs barely holding her weight. Through the bond, she felt Dante's location. 2 floors up, still fighting despite his injuries. She had to get to him. The facility was a maze of corridors, but her empathic senses guided her toward the strongest source of pain and fury. She found him in what looked like an interrogation room, restrained to a chair while 2 guards worked him over methodically. Sera didn't hesitate. She hit them with everything she had. Projected fear so intense they forgot how to breathe. Guilt so overwhelming they couldn't stand. Horror at their own actions so acute it broke something essential in their psyches. They collapsed, and Sera rushed to free Dante from his restraints. "You're okay," she sobbed, her hands shaking as she worked the locks. "You're alive." "You're amazing," Dante interrupted, his voice rough but warm. "You're absolutely amazing. What you just did was terrifying," Sera admitted. "I broke them, Dante. Used my abilities to shatter their minds. You survived. You fought back. You saved us both." His hands cupped her face despite his injuries. "Never apologize for that." Gunfire echoed from elsewhere in the building, Morrison's team, finally fighting their way inside. "Can you walk?" Sera asked, seeing the extent of Dante's injuries now. Blood, bruises, at least 1 broken rib based on how he was holding himself. "Can you?" he countered, noting her tranquilizer-induced weakness. "Together," she suggested. "Always together." They stumbled through the facility, supporting each other, guided by Sera's empathic senses toward Morrison's advancing team. Other captives. Real ones this time, actual trafficking victims held in the building's lower levels. Fled with them, freed by the chaos Sera had created. When they finally made it outside into the cold night air, Sera collapsed against Dante. Her empathic abilities stretched beyond their limits, her body exhausted from adrenaline and fear. "I've got you," Dante murmured, his arms holding her up even though he was barely standing himself. "Morrison's team has the site secured. Vera's in custody. We won." "At what cost?" Sera whispered, thinking about the minds she'd broken, the permanent damage she'd inflicted with her abilities. "At the cost of your innocence about what you're capable of," Dante said quietly. "But Sera, you used that power to save lives. Yours, mine, every Omega in that facility. That's not something to regret." Through their bond, she felt his absolute certainty, his unwavering support, his understanding that sometimes survival required doing terrible things. "I scared myself," she admitted. "The things I did with my abilities, that's exactly what the Collector wanted. A weaponized empath who could break minds." "No," Dante said firmly. "The Collector wanted a slave who would use empathic projection on his orders. You used it to save yourself and others. That's the difference between a weapon and a warrior. Choice." Agent Morrison approached, her tactical gear bloodied, but her expression satisfied. "We've secured 15 captives from the lower levels, arrested 23 operatives including Vera Blackwater, and recovered enough evidence to dismantle her entire operation." She paused. "What the hell did you do in there?" "My team found half the guards catatonic. I defended myself," Sera said simply, "using whatever tools I had available." Morrison studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "That's the story that goes in my report. Self-defense. Justifiable use of abilities against hostiles. Even though you did exactly what you needed to do to survive," Morrison interrupted. "Sera, I've been in law enforcement for 15 years. I know what trauma does to people, and I know that sometimes survival looks ugly. What matters is you're alive, your mate's alive, and we stopped a trafficking operation that would have enslaved hundreds more Omegas." The weight of judgment Sera had been anticipating didn't come. Instead, Morrison's expression held only respect and understanding. "We're done after this," Sera said firmly. "No more consultation missions. I need time to recover, to process what I'm capable of, to figure out how to use these abilities without becoming the monster the traffickers wanted to create. Fair enough, Morrison agreed. You've given us enough intel to coordinate raids on the remaining syndicate facilities. We can handle it from here. As medical teams arrived to treat the wounded and transport the rescued captives, Sera leaned into Dante's warmth and let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. She'd weaponized her empathic abilities, broken minds, done things she'd never imagined herself capable of. But she'd also saved lives, freed captives, stopped another trafficking operation. The question was, which of those truths would define her moving forward? We'll figure it out together, Dante murmured, reading through their bond the turmoil churning inside her. Whatever this means for you, for us, for your abilities, we'll figure it out together. Through the bond, Sera felt his absolute faith in her, his unshakable certainty that she was still the woman he loved, regardless of what she'd done to survive. Together, she agreed, and let herself believe it might be true. Epilogue, 6 months later. The sanctuary compound had expanded dramatically. What had started as one facility now included 3 full compounds and 7 satellite safe houses across 4 territories. The trafficking syndicates that had tried to fill the collector's power vacuum had been dismantled through coordinated law enforcement efforts, leaving a temporary peace in the ongoing war against Omega exploitation. Sera stood on the hill overlooking the main compound, watching as a new group of rescued Omegas arrived for integration. 6 months ago, she would have rushed down to greet them, to use her empathic abilities to assess their needs immediately. Now she knew better. Healing couldn't be rushed, and she needed to protect her own mental health if she wanted to be useful to others long-term. Admiring your empire? Nora asked, appearing beside her with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Not my empire. Ours. Sera accepted the mug gratefully. How are the new arrivals? Scared. Hopeful. Same as we all were at the beginning. Nora's expression softened. Elena's got them settled in the orientation wing. Dr. Carr's doing medical evals. Everything's running smoothly without you micromanaging. I don't micromanage. You absolutely micromanage. But you're getting better at delegating. Nora grinned. Must be Dante's influence. He's been training you in the art of letting other people do their jobs. Sera laughed. Her mate had indeed been working with her on boundaries, professional and personal. After the Vera Blackwater incident, they'd both agreed she needed time to recover from the psychological toll of weaponizing her abilities. The therapy had been intense but helpful. Dr. Carr had brought in specialists who worked with wolves who'd killed in self-defense, who understood the guilt and trauma that came from doing necessary violence. Slowly, Sera was learning to integrate what she was capable of with who she wanted to be. Boss, Axel's voice carried across the compound. We've got visitors. Official-looking visitors. Sera and Nora exchanged glances before heading down the hill. In the compound's main courtyard, 3 wolves in government insignia stood waiting. Agent Morrison and 2 others Sera didn't recognize. Agent Morrison, Dante said, appearing from his office with that careful politeness he reserved for authorities. We weren't expecting you. Apologies for the surprise visit. Morrison gestured to her companions. This is Director Chun from the Omega Protection Commission and Special Investigator Reeves from the Federal Wolf Authority. They wanted to meet with you and Sera personally. Sera's empathic senses reached out automatically, reading the emotional signatures of the newcomers. Not hostile, curious, respectful, carrying something that felt like hope. What's this about? Sera asked, moving to stand beside Dante in a united front. Director Chin stepped forward, a middle-aged woman with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. It's about the future of Omega Protection Services. Thanks to your work, both of you, we've seen trafficking operations decrease by 40% across 5 territories in just 6 months. That's unprecedented. You want us to do more consultation work, Sera said flatly. I told Morrison. We want to offer you something different, Chin interrupted gently. A permanent position as special advisors for Omega Protection. It would involve policy work, training programs for law enforcement, occasional consultation on high-priority cases. But only when you choose to accept them. Full autonomy, government resources at your disposal, legal authority to operate across territorial boundaries. The offer was staggering in its scope. What they'd been doing on their own, they could do with official backing and unlimited resources. What's the catch? Dante asked suspiciously. No catch, Special Investigator Reeves said. The truth is, we're losing the war against trafficking. We need innovative approaches, and your combination of Alpha Nightshade's tactical expertise and Sera's abilities represents our best hope for systemic change. Through her empathic senses, Sera felt the sincerity in his words. These weren't corrupt officials trying to exploit her. These were bureaucrats genuinely trying to protect Omegas and willing to try unconventional methods. Can we think about it? Sera asked. Take all the time you need, Chin said. We're not going anywhere. After the officials left with promises to send detailed proposals, Sera and Dante retreated to their private quarters to discuss. What do you think? Dante asked, his arms coming around her from behind as they stood at the window overlooking the compound. I think it's everything we talked about wanting to build, Sera said slowly. A network, a movement, a world where Omegas don't have to live in fear. We'd have resources to expand Sanctuary, legal authority to shut down trafficking operations before they establish themselves, training programs to prevent the next generation of victims. But, Dante prompted, sensing her hesitation through their bond. But I'm scared, she admitted. Scared of what using my abilities in that official capacity might require. Scared of weaponizing empathy again. Scared of becoming the tool the collector wanted me to be, even if it's for good reasons. Dante turned her to face him, his dark eyes serious. Then we set ironclad boundaries. You consult only on cases you choose. You never use your abilities beyond your comfort level. And the moment it becomes too much, we walk away. Can we do that? Just walk away from helping. We can do anything we decide to do together, he said firmly. Sera, you've already saved hundreds of Omegas. You've built something incredible here at Sanctuary. If you never use your empathic projection abilities again, you'll still have made a profound difference. The permission to stop, to rest, to choose herself over the mission. It was still new enough to feel like a gift. I want to help, she said finally, but on our terms, with protections built in to prevent burnout, with regular therapy and oversight to make sure I'm using abilities ethically, with you beside me every step of the way. Always beside you, Dante promised. So that's a yes to the government position? That's a yes to considering it seriously. To negotiating terms that protect me while letting us do meaningful work. She smiled. Together, he agreed, and kissed her as the sunset painted their compound in gold and orange. Below them, Sanctuary continued its work, Omega families healing, children playing without fear, wolves building new lives from shattered pieces. What had started as one Alpha's mission of vengeance had become a movement that was reshaping how the wolf world treated its most vulnerable members. And at the center of it all was a bonded pair who'd found each other in the darkest circumstances, who'd built something beautiful from shared trauma, who'd learned that broken didn't mean weak. It meant surviving what should have destroyed you. Sera Ashwood Nightshade had been sold by her father, enslaved by traffickers, told she was damaged goods beyond repair. But she'd been saved by a dark alpha with blood on his hands and purpose in his heart. She'd been strengthened by a community of survivors who became family. And she'd been freed by discovering that her scars made her stronger, not weaker. That her pain gave her empathy, and empathy could change the world. Sometimes the greatest power wasn't what you could destroy. It was what you chose to build, protect, and nurture into something lasting. As laughter echoed across Sanctuary's grounds, as rescued Omegas found their voices again, as wolves discovered that healing was possible even after unthinkable trauma, Sera knew they'd found something worth every moment of darkness that had led them here. The dark alpha who'd hunted trafficking operations with ruthless efficiency had found his mate among the broken. Together, they were building a world where no Omega would ever be broken again. And that, in the end, was worth everything.